In the depths of the darkness, a bright spark suddenly flared up, like a star, illuminating the darkness with its warm light and awakening hope for a bright future. The light gradually grew brighter, and soon the figure of a slender man with a confident posture appeared in the opening, who seemed to be part of the legend itself. Mr. Linos, accompanied by his inseparable assistant, bowed their heads over the notes, discussing in subdued voices that their long and persistent research had finally been crowned with success, opening up new horizons of knowledge for them. The crowd of people gathered around grew larger with each passing moment, and it soon became clear that the mysterious man who had appeared in the light was none other than the powerful ruler of the legendary Magic Tower. The guy was the epitome of perfection. Tall, with perfectly styled hair, glasses that gave him an intelligent look, and piercing blue eyes. To top it all off, he turned out to be the teacher of the main character of the novel. Somewhere off to the side, people gathered together, animatedly and loudly discussing something, their voices merging into a hum, creating a feeling of tense anticipation or excitement. The room they were in was furnished with astonishing luxury. Massive furniture, decorated with exquisite carvings, heavy curtains made of expensive fabrics, and huge paintings on the walls gave it the appearance of a real fairy tale castle. Leno suddenly bowed before the girl, and his soft, almost calming smile, combined with a gentle look filled with sincere warmth, seemed to be trying to instill in her calm and confidence. Then he carefully took the creature's fluffy, soft paws into his strong but gentle hands, as if intending to protect him from any danger, pressing him to himself with amazing care. It was at this moment that the person who accidentally found himself in this mysterious world, full of oddities, suddenly realized that something was clearly wrong. Her body, so familiar, turned out to be much smaller in size and covered in soft fur. In place of the man, there unexpectedly appeared a cute penguin with shiny plumage, whose master and patron was the ruler of the Magic Tower himself, surrounded by secrets and power. As it soon turned out, the girl had undergone an amazing transformation, finding herself inside the plot of a romantic story about a wolf master and his beloved, and her new essence was the embodiment of a unique character. According to the author of the novel, the main character is a man who is a werewolf and left his mark on an innocent healer who once came to his aid at the most difficult moment of his life, becoming his salvation and destiny. Under the bright light of the full moon, the wolf let out a long howl, leaving his mark, which was a kind of one-sided love contract, forever binding the werewolf to the one he imprinted as his only destiny. In the context of the novel, this act seemed incredibly romantic. The heroine and the werewolf were the perfect couple, whose feelings seemed sublime, sincere, and filled the story with the beauty of their extraordinary love. However, for the object of obsessive affection, this love turned into real madness, because the wolf, driven by passion, was ready to go to any extremes for the sake of his chosen one, without thinking about the consequences, sprinkling the earth with the blood of enemies. The maiden herself, like a bird, found herself locked in a golden cage of the mad obsession of a man whose love was at once captivating and suffocating, leaving her no choice or freedom. In her past life, she was avidly reading this novel, full of passion and drama, until fate suddenly cut her life short, leaving behind unfinished dreams and impressions. After taking a bite of the cookie, the girl in the hospital room quietly muttered that the fate of the main character of this story seemed unfair and cruel, because she was treated as if her feelings and desires were insignificant. Sitting in the man's strong arms, the girl suddenly found a new name, Adelia, and her new daddy continued to coo sweetly, as if this strange world and her new appearance were completely natural. Looking in the mirror, she realized with difficulty that she was now seeing her reflection as a cute penguin, which seemed completely out of place in the plot of the romance novel she had read in her past life. Adelia could barely hold back her tears, feeling despair growing inside her from the understanding that her essence had now become alien to her previous human form, and she was forced to accept a new, very unusual reality. Throughout the entire time, Lenos held the penguin close to him with amazing care and tenderness, affectionately calling him the most wonderful creature the boy had ever met. The problem was not that the penguin was not the main character of the novel or part of the new environment, but something much more complex and personal for the beautiful girl. Through her tears, crushed and confused, she realized that the true grief was in her new identity. She was just a domestic penguin, born artificially in a magical laboratory where her fate was already predetermined. After some time, the maiden managed to get used to her new life, and now the contented Beastman settled comfortably on the soft fabric, eating fresh cakes with appetite and enjoying the moment. Lenos walked into the room with grace and confidence, heading straight for his daughter, who squealed with delight at his appearance and jumped up and down in joy like a little ray of sunshine. With a slight smile, the man asked the penguin if it would like to go to the pool with him, to which the creature, chirping cheerfully, expressed its full consent, reflecting its sincere affection for its caring educator. A real elite buffet was always laid out for her, including only the best dishes, ideally suited to her unusual appearance, as if confirming the female status of a unique creature. The small, fluffy penguin always wore exquisite outfits, dresses decorated with ribbons and bows, which emphasized her charming and touching appearance. The baby was swimming in a large pool, happily flapping her tiny wings, as if enjoying every moment of this unusual but amazing life. When night fell, the windows of the luxurious mansion softly emitted a warm light that filled the surrounding world with an atmosphere of coziness and mysterious fairy tale. The little penguin sat right on the cold floor, sincerely praying and hoping for a miracle that one day fate would allow him to regain his human form and return to his former life. His furry paws, clasped together in a gesture of desperate supplication, remained motionless, but there was no answer to his quiet requests, leaving only a painful silence. At the same time, the man who was taking care of his unusual daughter calmly stood in front of her, speaking with a soft but serious voice while she sat on the sofa, lost in her sad thoughts. With a smile on his face, the beautiful Lenos confessed to his clever daughter that he was sincerely glad of her simplicity and ordinariness, because she was just a penguin and not something big or complicated. The little penguin visibly flinched at the unexpected words and realized with a heavy heart that his dear and kind father harbored a deep hatred for the Beastman that he had never even suspected before. In the original version of the novel, the world was full of prejudice, where pure-blooded humans despised and hated Beastmen, considering them inferior beings unworthy of respect or acceptance. With his head down and feeling depressed, the little penguin decided to keep his secret, because the thought that his own father could hate his true nature seemed too painful and unbearable. Noticing the sadness and melancholy reflected in his daughter's eyes, Lenos leaned towards her with concern and asked with genuine concern about her well-being, trying to understand what could have upset her so much. And then one day, on a sunny day, a young man of amazing beauty crossed the threshold of their house. His snow-white hair shimmered softly in the light, and his piercing eyes, like two precious stones, looked with confidence. His name was Suradale, a human killer whale of noble Vila bloodline, whose appearance was striking in its exquisite beauty and refinement. His appearance caused an uneasy response in the maiden's soul, awakening a sense of wariness. The little penguin, trying to cope with his inner embarrassment, covered himself with his tiny wing, trying to somehow shield himself from the dazzling charm of this young man. However, there was something unusual about his appearance that immediately caught the eye. His snow-white hair was completely different from the usual combination of white and black characteristic of all killer whales. In the original story, the Vela family played only a minor role, remaining on the periphery of events, but in this new place, it became a dominant force that managed to conquer an entire continent and establish its influence. Therefore, the appearance of a guy, a representative of this family, served not only as an important event, but also as confirmation that the plot of a familiar story had been changed, acquiring a completely new scale and placing emphasis on previously insignificant characters. The main thing was that a person, possessing intelligence and will, could have a radical influence on the development of the plot of the book, but the animal in whose body the maiden ended up was unlikely to have such an opportunity or influence. Suradale suddenly touched his chin in a thoughtful gesture and, smiling, admitted that he was glad to meet such an unusual animal that did not show fear of him. And even more, he found the penguin an incredibly cute creature. Adelia, without saying a word, just silently looked at him with her tiny, shining eyes, trying to understand how sincere his words were. Lenos, who was standing nearby, greeted the guest with obvious mistrust and asked a direct, almost caustic question, trying to find out whether he meant that sympathy for a penguin in no way excludes a possible love for the meat of animals of the same species as his daughter. Adelia instantly tensed up, her small face contorted into a vicious expression that betrayed a defensiveness, as if she was going to fight back with all her might despite her fragility. Her determined and unexpectedly serious look caused the young man to laugh genuinely, which relieved the tense moment, and he, still smiling, hastened to assure her that he had never tried penguin meat and had never even thought about it. The room where this scene took place was filled with elegance. Many fresh flowers filled the air with a light aroma, and expensive, elegantly decorated furniture gave the atmosphere of luxury and nobility. Approaching his new little friend, Suradale offered him friendship with a good-natured smile, trying to win the trust and affection of the unusual creature. Curiously and cautiously, he touched his finger to the penguin's soft, bluish fur, enjoying its fluffy texture that seemed made for touching. However, this behavior caused a real outburst of indignation in Adelia. She became furious at such an impudent gesture and, angrily flapping her wings, began to stamp her feet, making indignant sounds. Realizing that the touching of her fur was clearly not to her liking, Suradale quickly suggested a more appropriate method of interaction, gently touching her beak, hoping that this would be perceived with less irritation. Without thinking twice, the beautiful Adelia, overcome with great indignation, sharply bit the impudent fellow on the finger, putting all her indignation and resentment into this gesture. Blood immediately began to ooze from the small wound, while her father watched with surprise and slight shock at the unexpectedly bold behavior of his daughter, who was not accustomed to such abrupt actions. It took a few moments for Adelia to realize what she had just done, and realizing her impulsiveness, she drew back, clearly shocked by her own action and unsure how to justify such an outburst. Suradale calmly assured the wizard that such a trifle as a bite was no problem at all for him, and he was able to easily heal himself by directing magical energy with his hand directly into the wound, which immediately disappeared as if it had never been there. After that, looking at the penguin with a thoughtful smile, he declared that the longer he watched the magician's daughter, the more he liked her, especially her expressive, almost crazy eyes, in which sparkled an energy beyond the control of ordinary reason. The penguin's eyes reflected Suradale's silhouette, and at that moment, Adelia suddenly realized that her action, no matter how impulsive it was a turning point that could radically change the familiar plot of the novel. Meanwhile, outside the windows, the weather was surprisingly clear. The skies were shining with a bright blue light, and the majestic towers of the magical house stood proudly, adding a sense of power and mystery to the atmosphere. Adelia, irritated and dissatisfied, cast piercing glances in front of her, as if trying to express all her accumulated emotions without a single word. The man, feeling awkward under such a close, almost passionate gaze, quietly muttered that he was not used to such attention, and was a little embarrassed when the penguin looked at him so intently. The next day, Suradale appeared in the house again, and smiling, asked if there would be any objections if he began to call the animal by the short name Leah, abbreviated and sonorous, as a reflection of her essence. Night fell. A full moon rose in the dark sky, its silvery light softly streaming through the windows of the house, filling the room with a mystical glow and creating an atmosphere of mystery. A tired Adelia lay limply on the bed, spreading her tiny wings as if she had completely lost her energy, thinking about Suradale, who, despite her obvious irritation and dislike, remained unperturbed. When she bit him in a fit of anger, he used magic with surprising calmness to instantly heal the wound, leaving her puzzled and wondering about his oddities. Magic had always been considered a privilege of pure-blooded humans, while the Beastman she now belonged to could not use it, making Suradale even more unusual. Rolling over onto her side, Adelia remembered her father's words, telling her that a rare family of Vila were unique and distinguished by the fact that they could use magic, possessing special, almost legendary abilities. The baby, comfortably settled on a soft pillow, closed his tired eyes and soon fell into a sweet sleep, pressing his cheek to the soft fabric, as if finding peace and the necessary protection there. With the dawn of a new day, a loud and firm word, "No," echoed along the wide street, like an announcement of the beginning of something significant and changeable. The girl looked at her reflection in surprise, not believing her eyes. Her cherished dream had finally come true, and she had become a human being. Her hair now shimmered with shades of black and white, as if symbolizing the harmony of opposites. The woman's hand involuntarily clenched into a fist, and despair raged in her soul. She could not come to terms with the fact that, due to the appearance of a mysterious stranger, her dream of regaining her human form was destroyed. But now she faced an even more important dilemma. Would Lenos be able to accept her in the form of a beastman, especially considering that her father had always had a deep hatred for werewolves? Standing in front of the mirror and looking at her reflection, the girl thought with a heavy heart that perhaps she should give up this form and return to her usual animal form. A cold sweat ran down her back as she suddenly realized that she knew how to become a penguin again, but the thought simultaneously terrified her and seemed inevitable. Realizing that there was no other way left, she resolutely stepped onto the balcony railing. Her heart constricted with fear and longing, but her gaze remained firm and directed into the distance. Leah, trembling with sobs, mentally asked her father for forgiveness for her daring escape, feeling her soul being torn apart by regrets and an invisible barrier that the lady could not overcome. Suddenly, the girl's plans changed completely, and now the cart, rattling its old wheels along the rocky road, took her further and further from her home, leaving behind both memories and regrets. When the beauty came to after a deep sleep, she realized with horror that she had been kidnapped, tied up, and was now being taken somewhere in an old cart, which was shaking on the bumps, filling the air with the creaking of wheels. The men standing near the carriage were animatedly discussing their luck, loudly rejoicing at having managed to capture the Beastman, who had been sought for a long time by a noble Vila family. Laughing evilly and shamelessly, they boasted that they would now live in wealth for the rest of their days, adding that the captured girl had an unusual appearance. Her hair was half black, half white. Soon, Suradale joined the group, accompanied by his comrade, who with cold determination clarified whether the boys had really managed to capture the very man he had been so persistently searching for all these years. A hand reached forward tentatively to gently push the curtain aside, letting soft light into the large room, filled with a tense silence that seemed to drown out even the slightest sounds. Adelia froze in complete immobility, her heart beating as if in a cage of fear. She, tied up and helpless, with difficulty held back a stifled cry, feeling the approach of an unknown threat. At this point, Suradale turned to his mother, who, entering the room, stood in shock and horrified amazement at the sight of how cruelly the captured beastman had been treated, leaving him in such a humiliating position. Her name was Bella, the beautiful and majestic head of the House of Vale, whose face was contorted with indignation. Her voice was firm and uncompromising as she ordered Suradale to immediately untie the unfortunate girl, putting her out of her misery. The young man carefully removed the ropes from the girl, trying not to hurt her, while the woman next to him gently consoled the frightened poor thing, calming her with a quiet, encouraging voice. In the process, the man, trying to help the lady, suddenly noticed that her features seemed strangely familiar to him, as if he had seen her somewhere before, but could not remember where exactly. Meanwhile, the villains, realizing their monstrous mistake, tried to quietly escape from the scene of the crime, but suddenly stopped, hearing a commanding and stern voice that sounded with such force that it made them freeze. Bella, clenching her hands in anger, seethed with anger at the thought that someone dared to treat a representative of the Beastman so cruelly and humiliatingly, without respecting their dignity and rights. Without thinking twice, she loudly and decisively gave the order to her guards to immediately detain the criminals, neutralize them, and escort them into custody so that they could answer for their actions. Turning to the young lady, the woman apologized with deep regret expressing her sincere sympathy for the terrible ordeal she had to endure that could break even the most resilient person. A soft, friendly smile lit up her face, and, trying to create an atmosphere of trust, she introduced herself by her name, and then cautiously asked where the young girl came from. However, disturbing doubts were already beginning to arise in her head. Would the magician accept his daughter back into the family after she had acquired such an unusual form and become a beastman, which was so different from her usual image? Adelia suddenly, loudly, and decisively asked the head of the house to teach her to transform back from human form to animal form, which surprised everyone present with its unexpectedness. Bella froze for a moment, shocked by the girl's words, especially when she heard her sincere confession. The little girl did not want to hurt the one she loved, and therefore sought to become a beast again, returning to her previous form. With a soft smile, the woman gently took the girl's tiny hands in her own, her voice warm and comforting as she invited Adelia to stay in their home for a while, to learn how to become a penguin again. Bella sadly explained that she had long ago lost the opportunity to have her own children due to tragic events in the past, and since then, she had been unsuccessfully searching for her relatives, hoping to revive her lineage. However, her search was in vain, and she never found any of her relatives, remaining alone in a vast, cold land that no longer gave her hope of meetings. Squeezing the young maiden's hands with tenderness and a slight tremor, Bella seemed to convey to her care, sadness, and quiet joy that she now had a chance to find something more than loneliness. The beauty called the appearance of the young girl a real miracle. Her voice sounded sincere and warm, and then, with gentle persistence, she asked the little girl to accept the offered help without fear of trusting. Bella, smiling happily, blossomed widely with happiness, hearing the girl's consent. Her eyes sparkled with joy, as if she had found something long lost and dear. The hair of the Vale family has always been unique, with black and white being their signature coloring, worn with pride by both mother and son. Adelia, her mouth wide open in shock, realized that these people had probably mistaken her for a killer whale due to her similar unusual appearance and the variegation of her hair. The home of the Vale family was striking in its magnificence. Huge halls decorated with rare antiques and sparkling light of chandeliers emphasized the luxury and wealth of this ancient family. The aristocrats stood before their new acquaintance, looking at her with interest, surprise, and genuine admiration, still wondering how they could have accidentally mistaken her for one of their loved ones. Clenching her hand into a fist and pressing it to her heart, Leah gathered all her will into one whole, deciding to act for her father, who, like a lost seabird, was rushing about in search of his daughter. She had to do this for her father, who, filled with anxiety, was probably wandering the streets looking for his daughter, like a worried penguin who had lost his child. Adelia decided to keep the secret for now that she was not one of their kind, preferring to remain evasive and thus deceive the killer whales in order to avoid unnecessary suspicions and possible trouble. Her soul was especially tormented by anxiety about how that same handsome man would react, who had come to visit her so often before, always brought joy and evoked trembling feelings in her heart. Bella turned to the girl with a friendly smile, gently asking her name, but the little girl hesitated, clearly not knowing what to answer, or simply afraid to reveal her real name. Suddenly she shuddered, hearing a voice next to her, which unexpectedly sounded in her place, confidently pronouncing a short and sonorous name, Leah, as if this was the answer that had been long awaited. Suradale, smiling sweetly, offered to give the girl a new name if she didn't have one of her own. The man's voice sounded soft and encouraging, as if he wanted to take all the weight of her worries off her. Bella, hearing the proposal, noted with a slight smile that the chosen name was really beautiful, and immediately turned to the little girl, asking her opinion, terrified by the thought that the boy might find out her secret related to her true penguin form. The girl nervously whispered that she really liked the suggested name and was happy to accept it. Suradale, giving her an even warmer smile, noted with a light laugh that he had chosen this name by borrowing it from his close friend, which made the moment even more heartfelt and light. Adelia stared at the guy with a cold, almost evil look, her eyes flashing invisible lightning, because he allowed himself to so rudely call her animal form a girl, although in this form, she was more likely a female penguin. Her indignation was boiling inside, but suddenly, the guy leaned towards her so close that she felt his breath, and with a slight grin, asked if she, so bold and daring, was not afraid of him at all. Up close, Cyrodiil looked truly incredible. Its refined beauty, framed by soft light, seemed to hypnotize and attract the gaze, making the heart involuntarily beat faster. Adelia, sensing this embarrassment, turned away from him sharply, holding back her blush, and calmly replied that she had no reason to be afraid of her new acquaintance, although her voice trembled slightly. Cyrodiil froze in surprise, his golden eyes clouding for a moment, as if he was trying to understand the hidden meaning of her words, while a silence hung between them, tense but inexplicably warm. Their legs were so close to each other that it seemed that if they were to touch, they would destroy the invisible boundary that kept them apart. When asked unexpectedly why she was so sure that the guy would not harm her, the beauty froze, her gaze wavered, and the words got stuck in her throat. She hesitated, unable to find an answer right away. Cyrodiil slowly leaned closer, cunning golden eyes carefully studying her face, while warm hands gently touched the girl's shoulders, as if trying to calm all the trembling. With incredible gentleness, he straightened a strand of hair that had fallen out of her hair, his fingers gliding through her hair so lightly that the lady barely felt it. But the woman's heart began to beat faster from this barely perceptible gesture. In a thin, almost velvety voice, he hastened to dispel any fears, adding with a slight smile that he never harms creatures of his race, and the beauty can feel completely safe. The lady's cheeks instantly turned a deep shade of red, her lips parted slightly in surprise, and her eyes widened, expressing a mixture of embarrassment and confusion, as if the maiden did not know how to react. The guy, acting like a real scoundrel, laughed sincerely and infectiously, clearly enjoying the reaction, and honestly admitted that he always liked trusting people like her, whose sincere surprise was almost charming to him. The girl's hands, clenched into fists, trembled from the rolling anger. Her indignation grew like a storm inside, ready to break through. But she held back, trying to preserve the remnants of her dignity. Cyrodiil, with a slight smile, slightly tilting his head, asked his interlocutor an unexpected question, full of genuine interest. What should he do now if he began to like her even more than the penguin with the same name as her? Evening had fallen, and the cloud-covered sky had turned deep shades of orange and pink, filling everything around with the soft, soothing light of the setting sun. The guy, having settled into a soft chair opposite the woman, sat with her over a cup of aromatic tea, slowly telling her how Leah was gradually settling into their home, finding warmth, care, and her place among her new acquaintances. After a long discussion, they came to the conclusion that the girl was too intelligent, sophisticated, and amazingly talented to spend the rest of her life in the form of an animal, deprived of the opportunity to reveal her potential. Bella, saddened by these thoughts, suggested that Adelia's intelligence had probably begun to develop while still in her beast form, which was a miracle on one hand, but on the other meant that she might have been experiencing deep mental pain all this time. They also raised the possibility that Leah might be hiding the truth, despite the fact that her hair, alternating black and white strands, clearly identified her as an orca, making her virtually indistinguishable from one. However, this same hair, with its uniqueness, emphasized her peculiarity and made one wonder whether there was something more than just a coincidence hidden behind this external similarity. Suddenly, the woman froze, not having time to bring the cup of tea to her lips. Her gaze stopped for a moment, somewhere in the distance, when thoughts popped into her head that the guy constantly visited a penguin with the same name, Leah. She turned her gaze to her interlocutor, trying to understand his motives, but he, smiling slightly, casually noted that he simply liked the sound of this name, as if it contained something special and important. On the table in front of them stood 2 porcelain cups with the remains of tea, and next to it sat a teapot, from which a light, aromatic steam was still rising, filling the room with an atmosphere of peace and warmth. Having decided to allow their new friend to stay in their home, Bella suddenly admitted that with her appearance, she felt a sense of hope, as if together with this girl they had really found a lost family member. Suredale, at first thoughtfully silent, watched his mother, and then gently asked why she was so obsessed with finding the missing members of their kind, as if it was the most important thing in the world to her. These words caused Bella to suddenly laugh, behind which were hidden memories from the past. When she stood over the bodies of people lying motionless, her heart was breaking with annoyance and bitterness, and her teeth were clenched so that they almost broke. At that time, the maiden could do nothing, feeling helpless in the face of tragedy. But it was this that awakened in her a deep sense of responsibility and a firm resolve to always protect her family, no matter what the cost. Bella stated with determination that she was ready to do anything to keep her loved ones safe, and no obstacles could stop her on this path. Suredale, however, carefully reminded the mother not to place the entire burden of responsibility on the child, who, having become human, had acquired intelligence and his own desires. Smiling happily, Bella replied with a soft voice that her main goal would be to help the young girl adapt to society and then find her a worthy husband who could give her happiness. The guy immediately reminded her of his presence, adding that he also belongs to the genus of killer whales, and then, with a slight mockery, asked his mother if she expected something similar from him. Bella looked at her son in surprise, amazed that he had started a conversation about marriage, because before he had avoided this topic with all his might, flatly refusing to even think about family life. Looking at her son's mysterious smile, the woman narrowed her eyes and cautiously suggested that perhaps he had fallen in love at first sight for the first time, and that was why he had now decided to talk about such important topics. Suredale, turning away his gaze, looked intently at his palm, as if searching for answers there, and quietly replied that it did not matter if Bella had already decided to marry him off to another lady, regardless of his feelings. The spacious room of the mansion was filled with many fresh flowers, filling the air with freshness, and the white walls, enveloped in soft light, emphasized the elegance and tranquility of this corner of the house. The young man, with a slight smile, suggested to his new sister that they go to their native island, which had long belonged to their family and was located in the very heart of the endless ocean, where the waves gently washed the shores. Leah immediately imagined how she would have to turn back into a penguin in front of everyone, and what their surprise and shock would be when they saw such an unusual animal among the sea and sandy beaches. Spreading her arms out to the sides, the girl suggested training right there, without going anywhere. But the guy reminded her with a grin that it would be difficult, since there were no large bodies of water nearby. Suredale, gently embracing her hands with his own, added softly that Mother would probably be upset if she found out that Leah would be swimming in a modest pool that in no way resembled a spacious and deep ocean. Leah, feeling the excitement of his touch and confusion from his words, suddenly felt a growing panic. After all, she intended to escape, and now everything seemed even more complicated and confusing. Holding the boy's hand, Leah asked with mild curiosity how the Vila family managed to live in this city where there was almost no water, since they, being orcas, must have had a hard time without their natural element. The large mansion, surrounded by greenery, was striking in its magnificence, and it turned out that the Vila family, although they came from a family of large sea creatures, spent most of their time in their human form, adapting to the environment. Among the family's servants, as it turned out, there were many beastmen of other species. Some turned into dogs, others could become rabbits, which made life in the house unusually diverse and full of hidden secrets. In order to avoid fatigue and maintain a clear mind, all beastmen had to return to their true form from time to time, be it a snake, a squirrel, a bird, or any other animal to which they belonged. Into Leah's head, how killer whales, suddenly having acquired their natural form, were splashing right on the city streets, causing amazement, confusion, and probably no small amount of panic among unsuspecting people. Usually, the choice of profession among beastmen directly depended on their animal form. Wolves most often became brave knights, whose craft required strength and leadership. Elephants occupied an honorable place among outstanding scientists, thanks to their intelligence and patience. And foxes invariably found themselves at the center of the loudest and most intriguing scandals, which emphasized their cunning and ability to manipulate. Lost in thought about what role whales might play in this amazing society, Leah was suddenly pulled out of her thoughts by a soft yet confident voice that enveloped her like a warm wind. Suradale stood before her, and leaning closer, he asked her with a slight smile and a warm intonation in his voice to henceforth address him simply by his name, as if erasing the barriers that could still separate them. The girl immediately objected, declaring that she was supposed to address him exclusively as a young gentleman, emphasizing this with stubborn seriousness, as if reminding him of the rules of decency. However, realizing that the young man was seeking a more informal conversation, Leah demonstratively crossed her arms over her chest and then defiantly declared that she would never call him anything else, even if he wanted to. Suradale, maintaining a good-natured smile, calmly explained that he simply wanted his name to sound affectionate and simple, and did not mean anything more serious or binding. The beauty, placing her hands on her hips, firmly and confidently, noted that they had only met today, and it was still too early for such an informal conversation, although her tone still sounded less harsh. The smile on the young man's face faded slightly. He looked away and muttered something under his breath about meeting her for the first time, as if trying to hide some suspicion or inner uncertainty that had suddenly settled in his thoughts. After a short pause, Suradale regained his positive attitude, confirming with a slight smile that yes, this was indeed their first meeting, and he was glad that it all started this way. However, he blushed and froze when he heard that the girl's first impression of him was not the best. But instead of being upset, his face literally lit up with happiness, as if he took it as a challenge or special sincerity. Unable to contain her embarrassment, Leah covered her face with her hands, trying to protect herself from the dazzling beauty that seemed to emanate from him and made her heart beat a little faster. When the girl finally, albeit reluctantly, admitted that she found him slightly nice, Suradale couldn't contain his joy. His smile grew even wider, and he warmly noted that he was pleased to hear it, even if it didn't sound like a compliment. Suddenly, Suradale stood up from his seat. His face changed slightly, and he said that he had something special that he wanted to give to his companion, while he slowly began to put his hand in the pocket of his pants. He took out from his pocket a small blue stone that glowed mysteriously, as if it itself emitted a soft, magical glow. He handed it to the lady with a smile, explaining that he had originally intended to give the stone to another girl. In the women's palms, the glitter of the jewel shone with a bright light, like an invisible stream of light that pierced the darkness, reflecting all the beauty and value of this moment filled with mystery. In Leah's mind, and she began to assume that Suradale might have been jokingly comparing her to a penguin in her beast form, which caused her to feel an unpleasant feeling of insecurity and dissatisfaction. Without thinking twice, she firmly refused the offered gift, adding that the guy could give the stone to another person for whom it was originally intended, since she did not need it at all. Suradale himself, with a slight ironic smile on his face, decided that since the stone was of no use to her, it was better to get rid of it, and threw it away, which unexpectedly frightened Leah, making her feel awkward and confused. When the young man said that he no longer needed the jewel, Leah immediately leaned out of the window, her eyes quickly searching for the discarded gift, hoping to still find it in the darkness of the night. Suradale, smiling slightly, headed for the door, preparing to go out, and, as if in jest, advised the lady to go to bed early, since the day had been hard and tiring. Leah, without much enthusiasm, did not respond to such an offer of shopping the next day, not sharing the desire to go shopping, especially after what had just happened. She continued to stand at the high railing, unable to tear her eyes away from the empty ground, still trying to find the lost thing, not paying attention to everything else around her. Suradale watched her tireless search in silence, realizing that she kept grumbling about his actions, which seemed stupid and pointless to her, which only further confirmed her irritation. Before leaving, he wished her good night and a pleasant rest with sincere warmth, hoping that the night would bring her long-awaited peace and restore her strength for a new day. The room was furnished with amazing taste, luxurious furniture, made from the most expensive materials, harmoniously combined with the soft light of the moon, which barely illuminated it in the dark night. Adelia, comfortably settled in bed, was tightly covered with a warm blanket, enjoying the silence and peace of the night, which enveloped her in its calm, creating a feeling of safety and peace. The girl's face was distorted with an expression of discontent, as if she was experiencing a terrible nightmare in which her consciousness could not find peace and relaxation, distorting her features with suffering. Leah suddenly started and sat bolt upright in bed, unable to sleep due to raging worries, especially related to Suradale, who had been acting so strangely lately that she couldn't figure out his motives. But the main source of anxiety for Adelia remained Suradale, whose behavior became increasingly mysterious and incomprehensible, especially in those moments when he was near her. She was especially tormented by a feeling of regret for the beautiful, sparkling gemstone, which he, without attaching any importance to it, simply threw out the window, as if it were an ordinary trinket. For the penguin, who had always had a weakness for jewelry and literally adored surrounding himself with sparkling jewels, this was especially painful. The love of glitter and bright stones became part of his essence. I recalled the incident when Suradale, still a frequent guest, once asked with genuine interest whether it was true that penguins were partial to decorations that glittered in the sun. His question was full of curiosity. After this, the young man began to regularly bring decorations, each time demanding that the penguin perform various tricks in exchange for them, and sometimes even allowing himself to hug him, as if this was part of the deal. Leah, despite her inner doubts, could not resist the temptation to receive such exquisite jewelry, so she agreed to all the conditions that he set before her. She couldn't understand what exactly the guy wanted to tell her at that moment when he suddenly interrupted his speech, but she was determined to leave the house that night and go in search of the stone in order to return it at any cost. The woman's hand automatically reached out to the large door, her fragile fingers trembling slightly as she pressed the cold door handle, feeling excitement flood her mind. Without wasting any time, the beauty stood up from her seat, and without thinking about her actions, confidently walked towards the night's adventures, dressed only in a light nightgown. Holding the hem of her long dress, Leah walked slowly along the endless corridors of the old manor, feeling the cold draft that pierced the walls and filled the air with heaviness. Suddenly, her condition worsened sharply, and in order not to fall, she pressed herself against the cool stone wall while covering her mouth with her hand in an attempt to cope with the dizziness. Even back then, when the beauty first turned from a penguin into a human, weakness covered the fragile lady like a huge wave, leaving her motionless on the bed for long hours. Where the graceful lady had stood a moment ago, there now lay a penguin, surrounded by the folds of a dress that had fallen to the floor, which had recently emphasized her sophistication. A man suddenly appeared next to him, his expression a mixture of surprise and irritation. His gaze fixed on the strange scene, his shoes seemed to have grown to the floor, and his voice, barely audible, said that he had known the truth all along. Suradale, frowning, quickly picked up the penguin in his arms, noticeably agitated, and, cursing quietly under his breath, noticed how much she neglected her own health, bringing herself to exhaustion. Having lost consciousness, Leah, even in this state, continued to think about her father, fearing that he would not be able to accept his sweet daughter in her human form, which she became after the transformation. She loved her father, who embraced her with such warmth and care that in his arms she felt complete protection and love, as if nothing could threaten her, and the whole world became safe and cozy. The woman's fears grew stronger, because if Lenos, her only support, left, the girl could not imagine how she would be able to continue living, remaining completely alone in this world. Suradale carefully hugged the trembling and very cute penguin, who, overcome with fear, began to shake slightly, as if unable to cope with the enormous panic that had seized him. Large tears flowed from the eyes of the small blue creature, reflecting the depth of its experiences, as if even this tiny appearance could not hide the true emotions that were hidden inside. The morning of a new day had arrived, filled with the warmth of the sun's rays and the clarity of a cloudless sky, and the majestic mansion stood, as always, proudly towering in the middle of a well-kept garden. Turning over onto her other side, Adelia tried to shield herself from the bright sunlight that was shining through the curtains, preventing her from continuing to sleep peacefully in her bed. The light penetrating through the thin fabric burned her skin. Suddenly, feeling a strange presence nearby, the lady recoiled, her face contorted in horror as she realized that she was not sleeping alone. Next to her, in bed, dozed a handsome man with white hair. The man looked amazingly handsome, even in his sleep. His features were soft and his expression calm, as if the whole world could disappear and he would still remain just as calm and attractive. Suddenly, Cyrodiil woke up and, smiling, addressed his companion affectionately, wondering if she had really missed his company so much that she had come to his bed and lay down to sleep next to him. Leah wanted to be indignant, to remind that this was her room, her bedroom, but, looking around and noticing the elegant interior, the piano, the bookcases, she realized that she was in the guy's room. Leah stared ahead in confusion, not understanding how she had ended up in a strange bedroom, not having the slightest idea of what had happened, or how she had ended up in this unfamiliar place. Cyrodiil, as if mockingly, rose from under the blanket, and with a smile noted that their relationship was developing too quickly, which embarrassed his interlocutor and made the beauty blush. The man sat down on the bed calmly, looking at her carefully and expressing surprise, asking what she was doing in his bed at such an early hour, his words sounding with slight interest. The lady, slightly blushing and feeling awkward, admitted that she herself did not understand how she ended up in his room, surprised by what was happening, but still deciding to open up despite her embarrassment. Their hands lay close on the blanket, as if the invisible connection between them was growing stronger, and the deafening silence around was filled with hidden meaning and tenderness. The lovely maiden apologized, feeling awkward for having probably frightened the man with her sudden appearance. Not knowing how else to justify such an unexpected intervention, Cyrodiil smiled tenderly in response, expressing that he was pleased to see her at any time, regardless of the circumstances, and that her presence always pleased his soul. The young man began to shower the beauty with compliments, not missing a single chance to express his admiration, while she, despite her embarrassment, tried to defend herself from his words as best she could. Sitting on the bed, Cyrodiil apologized to the girl for not being able to take proper care of her, as a guest should, feeling guilty for not providing her with the comfort she deserved. Embarrassed, Leah looked down, realizing that she was the reason why she came to the guy so late, breaking the usual routine, and now she felt awkward for her actions. At that moment, a man's palm softly and soothingly covered her delicate fingers, as if giving her the support and confidence that she so needed at that moment. Cyrodiil asked that from now on, Leah not hide her pain, especially during moments of transformation into a beast, and always turn to him for help when she felt bad or out of place. The lady, looking at him, froze in confusion, not knowing how to respond correctly to his frankness and such a personal confession, which seemed to open up a whole new world of his feelings to her. Turning away from the orca, Leah muttered quietly that even if she got sick, the guy shouldn't worry about her so much, because there were things in her life that he couldn't understand and change. As a final argument, Cyrodiil used a small bag, saying that he would give it to the girl if she promised him that she would take care of herself and listen to his requests in the future. Leah shuddered, raising her hands in despair and screaming that it was her very stash of precious stones that the thieves had stolen, disturbing her peace and taking away what was so important to hers. The lady, feeling alarmed, raised her hands up, trying to get back her thing, which the man had so brazenly taken away, but he raised the bag so high that her height was not enough to reach it. With a serious change in his facial expression, the guy tried to play the role of someone who was genuinely concerned about the girl's condition, as if her worries were more important to him than anything else at the moment. Leah, blushing at his words, looked away, quietly saying that she understood, and promised that she would always come to him if she felt bad, no matter what the circumstances. And time passed quickly, and now the clock showed that a delicious breakfast would soon be served, which reminded everyone that it was time for them to move on, because their day was just beginning, and many things were waiting for their time. With his hands folded in front of him, the powerful Cyrodiil announced that they had to teleport away, as he had important matters to attend to that required his presence at the training site, where his knowledge and skills were needed. All excited, lovely, and beautiful, Leah was happy to try teleportation and couldn't wait for it to happen. Feeling like she was on the verge of something incredible, Suradale watched with a smile the lady's excitement, who was beaming with anticipation, clenching her hands into fists, and her joy was pleasant to him, like a living confirmation of her interest and attraction, causing warmth and satisfaction in his heart. Soon the boy extended his hand to the girl, offering her to grab it so that he could use his abilities and transport them to the desired location, which could greatly facilitate their journey. Leah didn't immediately extend her hand, as she didn't like to touch other people unless absolutely necessary, trying to avoid any unnecessary contact with strangers, especially in such a situation. Finally, she lightly touched his palm with her finger, cautiously and with obvious doubt, and quietly asked if such a light touch was enough to carry out the transfer without causing herself discomfort. The girl's reaction caused the sweet young man to laugh sincerely, because he considered her caution incredibly sweet, finding in it a special charm that he could not help but admire. Suddenly, magic appeared in the room, enveloping the young people in a blue glow that softly dissipated through the air, creating an atmosphere of wonder and mystery, as if the space around them was filled with an invisible force. In the square where people were slowly moving, a magical seal appeared on the ground, which began to glow with a bright light, attracting attention and creating a feeling of something unusual. Then long legs appeared, as if emerging from nowhere, and it became clear that this was a teleport. Their movement began, and the magic of the surrounding world gradually led to the long-awaited result. They moved in the blink of an eye, and now they were in the main square where the wizards usually trained, feeling like they were in a place full of magic and power, accustomed to its presence. However, the knights who were peacefully walking around had a clear reaction of fear and horror when they saw the young gentleman appear out of nowhere, as if emerging from the void, causing them to be confused. Suradale leaned forward, outraged that the girl had said that the knights were afraid of him, and pointed at one of them with a smirk, as if to prove that her words were not entirely true. The lady immediately fell silent, realizing that her words could only make the situation worse for the guards, and her gaze slid to one of them, full of malice, as if fearing that the magician could direct his power at him. Unable to withstand the pressure from the magician, Leah pointed her finger at one of the guys, mentally apologizing to him for what happened, but realizing that she had no other choice but to agree to the demand. This man turned out to be the largest and most muscular of the knights, and like all the others, he was overcome with fear in front of the newly appeared magician, experiencing doubt and confusion. The poor guard shook with fear as the orca's face turned towards him, while Leah quickly took her words back, trying to calm her companion and ease the tension in the air. Suradale turned around in surprise, asking how his interlocutor could have guessed that this guard was of the rodent family and probably belonged to the flying squirrel species, to which the girl only shrugged, smiling. A picture quickly formed in Adelia's mind. The man and the small rodent really did have similarities, and it was hard not to notice their common features, which immediately caught her attention and caused her to speculate. The guy changed the subject, claiming that, being both a swordsman and a mage, he also had muscles like all his colleagues, and he was upset that the lady was paying attention to the other guards. An image quickly appeared in Adelia's mind of the girl using her magic to control a knight-shaped blade while fighting an invisible enemy, causing her to become a little distracted from reality. The handsome man looked away in embarrassment and said that he now understood the lady's preferences and would definitely remember them. There was a slight irony in the man's voice, concealing a hint of discontent. The girl's hand lay on the guy's shoulder, squeezing his shirt with her fingers, as if emphasizing her determination and dissatisfaction with his thoughts, which she clearly did not like. It was the hand of a girl who did not share her companion's train of thought, and therefore decided to immediately put everything in its place, frowning and expressing her dissatisfaction with every word he said. She hastened to explain that she was much more interested in clothes that sat beautifully on a man's muscles, rather than the body itself, which, in her opinion, was of little importance. Suddenly, Leah remembered how last time, in the form of a penguin, she tried to strike a nasty wizard who endlessly bothered her with his actions, not giving her peace and making her feel vulnerable. The girl's mistake was to think that the guy, being a wizard, would be soft and defenseless, but her head almost split on his steel press when she tried to attack. Suradale was the perfect man, if you exclude his bad character and impeccable appearance, which, however, could not hide his complex and contradictory inner world. With a serious expression on her face, Leah loudly declared that the killer whale was a perfect fit for her ideals, despite all his peculiarities and characteristics, which, in her opinion, only added to his attractiveness. Suradale pressed his hands to his chest and muttered that, if such compliments continued, his heart would break and he would not be able to respond calmly to her words. In response, he admitted that he also liked this girl, especially her cold but sincere look, which made him feel a special excitement that he had not encountered before. Leaning towards his companion, the man suggested that she play a little with the knights while he talked to the commander, assuring her that it would be an interesting activity for her, full of unexpected moments. The girl stood up, leaning against the fence, deciding to wait for her companion in silence and solitude. She was still wearing her nightdress and slippers, which gave her image a calm and cozy feel. But suddenly, the noblewoman was surrounded by other guards, who could not contain their curiosity and hastened to find out whether she was also a killer whale, like the young master. Hoping to find out this fact, one of the guys leaned over and, addressing her excitedly, mockingly asked if the stern Suradale was making fun of her, hinting at the strange situation and relationship between them. Leah was quick to deny all the accusations, insisting that their relationship with the young master was completely non-violent and that nothing like that happened, as they might have thought. Another knight, waving his hands, began to insist that Suradale often laughed and mocked the lady, perhaps making her the butt of his jokes and sneering at her expense. It turned out that the man laughed only when he threatened others or wanted to hurt them, and his laughter, accompanying such threats, sounded ominous and frightening, giving him the image of a dangerous person. The beauty's face was distorted with horror, as she, in her imagination, imagined the terrible lord sitting on the throne, surrounded by chaos, with his every word and movement as if generated by dark forces. The guard breathed a sigh of relief, relieved to learn that Suradale had done nothing to harm the girl. Moreover, they were both of the same species, and therefore it was unlikely that the man would hurt his own family. Putting her hand to her chest, the beauty said with some hope that perhaps Suradale had fallen in love with her at first sight, trying to find an explanation for his strange behavior and unexpected actions that she could not understand. However, a moment later, the lady's face became disbelieving, and with disgust, she realized that even the thought of possibly falling in love with this fool, whose actions did not inspire confidence, was absolutely unacceptable to her. Suradale acted towards her as if he was hugging her in his penguin form, viewing her as nothing more than a cute pet, without much regard for her feelings, making her feel more like an object of his care than an equal companion. The knight did not back down from his position, continuing to assert that the young gentleman's smile was strange, and asked curiously if his companion knew his nickname, which not everyone dared to pronounce. It turned out that such a powerful wizard had a second name, Laughter Therapist, which only added mystery and irony to his image, because his magic was so powerful that it could even heal hearts with laughter. The nickname, however, meant that when someone needed help, the guy would start by hitting them, then healing them, and so on, creating a strange but effective healing cycle. And throughout the entire healing process, a wide smile never left the face of this evil magician, which frightened everyone around him, leaving the feeling that there was something dangerous and unkind hidden in his actions. Leah was frightened by such news about her friend, and she shrank from fear, realizing that in this wizard, at first glance sweet and innocent, something much darker and more threatening was hidden. Suddenly, loud footsteps were heard from afar, slowly approaching, and they were joined by another person, this time a familiar face, the guy who returned from his meeting in the tower of the educational institution. It was Suradale, who had returned from the meeting and was now asking his companion with interest about who she had met and how she had spent her time, showing lively curiosity. The entire group, not knowing how to react, immediately fell silent and huddled in a corner, moving away from the terrible magician, as if instinctively sensing the threat emanating from his cold gaze and self-confidence, making everyone around him nervous. So Adelia, trying to avoid further tension, decided to lie, saying that she had been told about the great possession of this powerful wizard and his skill in handling the sword, hoping to calm both herself and those around her. Then, with a slight challenge in her voice, the lady asked her interlocutor to demonstrate his fencing skills, eagerly awaiting to see how impressive his abilities really were. She began running her finger over the guards, slowly choosing who would become her victim for a small but exciting test, thinking that it would be an interesting way to test not only the strength, but also the dexterity of each. After which, smiling playfully, she returned to the conversation with her companion and skillfully changed the subject, as if accidentally distracting attention from the tense situation, trying to once again establish an atmosphere of ease and casualness, as if nothing had happened. It turned out that Surdale had asked the commander to provide several escorts for the lady, as they might be needed in the future to ensure her safety and comfort. Leah asked, frowning, puzzled, why she needed helpers, because she didn't see the need for it. Security seemed unnecessary, especially considering that killer whales are a rare population and are on the verge of extinction. Remembering how she was always looked after and watched over in her penguin form, the girl couldn't find the right answer, unable to resist the thought that safety was still important. Surdale tried to calm his friend down, asking her not to think about such things and just enjoy the moment, leaving worries and concerns for later, as if trying to distract her from unnecessary thoughts. However, the man, not being so easily persuaded, was not going to just give in. He offered the girl to choose one of the 3 guards for herself, so that she would feel safe and not worry about what awaited her in the future. Surdale was even ready to become a mother to her if it could calm the beauty down a little. The words did not sound like a joke, and this emphasized the seriousness of his intentions. The knights were stunned by how calmly Leah spoke to the young master, and how freely he responded, sometimes in a joking manner, which only increased the surprise of those around him. From the outside, they looked like a couple who had been together for many years. 10, maybe more, and were now discussing something important, like old friends who had known each other for a long time and were accustomed to living together. The girl preferred solitude, believing that she was happiest in peace and quiet. Last night she had barely managed to drive the maid out of her room so that she could finally be alone with herself. Clutching her head and feeling growing dissatisfaction, Adelia felt herself gradually losing her patience. She no longer knew what to do with this annoying guy who would not leave her alone, preventing her from concentrating. But suddenly, her gaze was drawn to a new knight, towards whom a small butterfly was flying swiftly, fluttering merrily in the air. The tall guy was quite cute, with bright blonde hair, and had a slightly naive, funny look. He was also really attractive, with dark, slightly curly hair that shone in the sun, and an unusual charisma only enhanced his appeal, adding a bit of fun and lightness to him. Adelia instantly pointed her finger at this prominent guard, decisively declaring to her companion that she had chosen him as her new escort. With no doubt in her decision, the gorgeous lady quickly jumped up to the man, whose animal form resembled a black cow, and smiling addressed him with a confident and friendly tone. The guy, with a slight blush on his cheeks, confidently confirmed that he really was the animal in question, his words sounding confident despite his slightly embarrassed look. The beauty, without wasting any time, immediately laid out her request to her interlocutor, expressing her desire for him to become her personal security guard, emphasizing the importance of this appointment and her confidence in his abilities. The man was clearly concerned that he felt he was not worthy of being the assistant to such a majestic lady, but Adelia quickly reassured him, assuring him that she had no objections to his role. The knight himself looked so calm, confident, and safe that he seemed like the perfect choice for her, as if he was created specifically to serve as her protector. The beauty, with sincere admiration on her face, clasped his palms with her own, feeling how the warmth of his touch filled her soul with peace and tranquility. Smiling happily, she excitedly announced that this black knight was the one she had been looking for many years, and finally, her search was crowned with success, as she had found him, the one who would become her perfect ally. and perhaps something more. Suradale watched this entire scene silently, his aura beginning to fill with a dark shadow of discontent and hidden anger, as if he did not approve of what was happening. He looked incredibly jealous, pressing his hand to his face and thinking deeply about why his beloved had chosen this particular guard, among many others, and what could have been the reason for her choice. The penguin room was decorated with luxurious furniture, which included expensive finishes, soft sofas, exquisite tables, and paintings, creating an atmosphere of coziness and elegance in this special place. Adelia, dressed in a new dress of a calm, muted color, gracefully appeared before everyone, announcing that she planned to live in the Vilas house for a while, wanting to enjoy the peace and quiet of this secluded place. Kanu, as the new guard of the maiden was called, bowed deeply and swore on his life and honor to protect this beautiful woman, promising to devote all his strength to protecting her safety. The guard was slightly embarrassed by the numerous compliments that the aristocrat showered on him, feeling out of place, but not daring to break politeness and express his awkwardness. Asking Kanu to bend over slightly, Adelia stated in a reserved but determined tone that she had another very important and personal request concerning him that she would like to discuss in a more private setting, alone with him. It all started back when Adelia was the youngest daughter and lived in her father's house. Then she had a devoted servant named Ypres, who with great care and attention often fed her with a spoon, like a mother protecting her. But at the mere mention of the black cow's child, the old servant usually squeezed the spoon tightly in her hand, so that the characteristic crunch of metal could be heard, breaking it, while radiating such a storm of indignation and anger that even the walls seemed to shake. And so, realizing that she needed to know more, Adelia hatched a very cunning and carefully thought-out plan to contact Ypres through Kanu in order to try to re-establish connections with the past and obtain important information through him. The man, having listened attentively to the request, did not hide his surprise when the lady, with some caution, but at the same time decisively, declared that she wanted to meet his older sister, which seemed unexpected and a little strange to him. Kanu, his eyes wide with surprise, quietly and somewhat confusedly replied that he had never had an older sister, and perhaps there had been some mistake or misunderstanding. This came as a real shock to the girl, because in the photographs, the girl and the guy looked so amazingly similar that it was hard to believe that they were not related by blood. It was not at all difficult to imagine them as two cows peacefully grazing in a field, as if their whole life was one big idyll, unmarred by any quarrels or disagreements. With a slight smile on his lips, the knight proudly declared that, despite the absence of an older sister, he still had a younger sister named Ypres, and this certainly brightened up the loneliness in the family. Embarrassed, but with a slight blush on her cheeks, the girl admitted her mistake, and raising her hands in repentance, admitted with a smile that in fact her sister looked much older than she had assumed. Suddenly, at the very moment when the girl tried to continue the conversation, her hands were unexpectedly grabbed by strangers, interrupting the night and causing a strange feeling of anxiety and uncertainty in her heart. Adelia, feeling awkward, resolutely changed the subject and explained that, being new to the house of Mrs. Orca, she did not feel entirely comfortable because she missed her old acquaintances and familiar surroundings. A memory of her father flashed through her mind, who often told his daughter that she must be happy no matter what the difficulties, and that happiness was the most important goal in life. The man, noticing her tension, gently and carefully returned his palms back, freeing the young lady's hands from his strong grip, trying not to cause her any unnecessary discomfort. Adelia, pressing her hands to her chest, began to cry, afraid that her father would not accept her in human form, and that her changed appearance would cause him to reject and misunderstand, as if her transformation had broken some invisible connection between them. The knight silently watched her tears, looking with sympathy as the interlocutor opposite him, desperately trying to contain her emotions, sobbed, but not knowing how to support her in this moment of pain and fear, feeling how heavy her heart was. With wet eyes, feeling a strong affection, he suddenly touched her, promising that he would bring his sister even if she resisted, because he was ready to do everything for her, despite the difficulties. At that moment, the door suddenly opened, and Suradale walked in with a slight smile on his face. Greeting the lady, but noticing her condition, he suddenly fell silent, not knowing how to continue the conversation in such a tense atmosphere. The man stood frozen in the doorway, his hand raised, stunned by the sight before him of young people chatting pleasantly, holding hands, creating an atmosphere of closeness and trust. A single tear rolled down the maiden's cheek, leaving behind a wet trail, a reminder of her inner pain that she tried to hide but could not contain. The boy's face was distorted with anger, and with an expression of hatred, he demanded that Sir Kanu immediately explain what was happening here and why his companion was crying, clearly unable to hide her indignation. After much explanation, Suradale and Adelia headed to the clothing store. The man, deep in thought, was pondering whether or not to take Kanu as an escort for the beauty, so as not to violate her personal space. With a serious expression on his face, the guy turned to Adelia and demandingly asked when she would go on a date with him, but the girl immediately refused, not wanting to even discuss such a possibility. While Adelia was choosing a new dress for herself, the wizard did not leave her side for a step, constantly nagging and complaining that his only goal was simply to protect this girl, despite her reluctance to perceive him as a protector. The saleswoman, standing politely nearby, asked with a smile whether the customers were going to buy anything, showing tact and willingness to help in choosing the product. The beauty had more than enough money. There were so many coins in her purse that they would be enough to buy many things, and she could easily spend this amount on any of her desires. Suddenly, Suradale noticed anxiety in the behavior of his companion, and, looking at her with concern, asked what was wrong with her, not understanding what could have caused the woman's anxiety. Turning away from his interlocutor, the guy, feeling the need to do something to calm her down, said that he could buy her anything she wanted, but only on the condition that she behaved politely and restrained. The girl instantly changed her attitude, not wanting to push away the rich boy who could pay for all her desires and help her realize her dreams. The clothes in the room were luxurious and expensive. Exquisite silk dresses, outfits that looked like works of art, attracting the eye with their elegance and quality. Having agreed with her companion, the lady received his card with money and, without wasting time, quickly bought herself everything she wanted, choosing outfits that matched her tastes and style. The streets of the city were filled with people walking calmly about their business, while in the village it was much quieter, and the houses were low, surrounded by green fields and vegetation. The young couple walked forward, enjoying each other, talking and spending this time alone, because for them it was an important and personal moment, independent of the outside world. Suddenly, Adelia stopped, noticing a group of pure-blooded people from the tower who were looking for someone with alertness and determination, obviously looking for traces in the crowd. They were holding up posters of a penguin in a bow, a brightly colored wanted poster, and Adelia felt the tension build and the beauty froze in place, putting her hand to her heart in horror, because it was she who was depicted in the photo. This meant that her father had not lost hope of finding his missing daughter, and his search continued. The men discussed among themselves who hated pure-blooded people and might steal the daughter of a great magician, hoping for some benefit or revenge, but no one knew exactly who might be guilty. There were also rumors that a Vila family, namely Suradale, stole the penguin because he often visited the wizard's tower, interacting with the small animals, which raised suspicions among the locals. The young couple looked at each other in surprise, exchanging a short glance that expressed a mixture of surprise and confusion, not understanding what was happening. At that moment, the maiden sincerely wished to become a rug in order to disappear from that place where everyone thought she was an evil penguin who stole all the money and ran away with it, leaving everyone bewildered. The guy's eyes watched his companion closely and intently. Their gaze was dangerous and predatory, as if the guy saw in her not just a person, but something that he needed to control. When asked if she still had that bag of money, the girl answered affirmatively, not hiding the fact that the money was still with her, although she felt the tense gaze of her interlocutor. Adelia shrank back in horror when Suradale, with a serious expression on his face, stated that he would like to step away and talk to her alone, which caused her anxiety and worry. The man shook his head and pointed towards the parked carriage, suggesting that they retire and discuss important matters in a private setting where no one could overhear them. The coachman was already sitting in his place, waiting for them, and holding the reins with which he controlled the horses, preparing for their departure. When they got into the carriage, suddenly another guy appeared next to them. Very tall, incredibly handsome, with a serious and slightly dissatisfied expression on his face. A real aristocrat who immediately attracted attention with his genuine pride. It was the novel's protagonist, Theodore, known for his origins, who turned out to also be the adopted son of a family of wild wolves, known for their ancient connection with werewolves. Previously cold and unapproachable, he changes completely when he meets the main character, Anemone, with whom he soon falls in love, discovering completely new and unknown feelings for him. Cyrodiil greeted the protagonist like an old, long-awaited acquaintance, with a sincere smile and an expression of joy on his face, standing right in front of him, as if this moment was destined by fate. Theodore, slightly bowing his head, turned to the killer whale, saying with interest and slight surprise that he had heard about the missing penguin and was very interested in learning more, as this event interested him. With a smirk and a slight displeasure on his face, Cyrodiil explained that he had been very busy lately, as he had been helping a precious guest who had needed his attention and support during the last few days. The man introduced the girl standing next to him to his old friend with politeness and respect, choosing his words carefully to create an atmosphere of respect and goodwill during their acquaintance. Rather rudely and with obvious displeasure, Theodore remarked that he saw nothing particularly remarkable in the lady who stood opposite him, which caused the penguin to burst into a fit of rage and bewilderment. After this, the young aristocrat, with restraint and almost interest, asked the nobleman whether he was going to take part in the upcoming hunting competition, which was to take place the following week. Every 5 years, a large-scale competition was held in which various families participated, and it was at one of these events that the main characters of this novel met, which became a turning point in their destinies. While hunting, Anemone unexpectedly came across a wounded wolf, leaning against a tree, looking very exhausted, and his clothes were soaked in blood, which immediately attracted her attention. Despite the ancient hatred passed down through families from generation to generation, Anemone felt genuine sympathy for the wounded creature, and, without hesitation, decided to help, healing it with her magic. The penguin flyers seemed to be slowly falling down, carried by the gusty wind through the air, as if reminding everyone of the strange and disturbing story associated with this creature. Anemone was a favorite student of the lady's father, and she often visited their home, where she happily spent her time learning and developing her skills, enjoying the warmth of these family gatherings. Kind and devoted, the maiden also took an active part in the search for the teacher's missing daughter, helping to distribute leaflets, which became her way of showing concern and involvement in this important matter. Putting her hand to her face, the girl quietly asked the wolf opposite if he was one of those who quickly fall in love at first sight, because she could not understand what was really hidden in his gaze. Theodore, grimacing in disgust, said that all the killer whales seemed to be very spoiled and rude people, with no refinement or respect for others. Adelia herself, experiencing great fear, was afraid that the wolf, like many men, could fall in love with her too quickly and become as annoying and persistent as Cyrodiil. Pointing her finger at her new acquaintance, Adelia loudly declared that she was not going to tolerate his rudeness and humiliating curses, deciding that her patience had its limits. Not wanting to remain in unpleasant company any longer, Theodore turned and, waving his cloak, declaring with confidence that he would certainly win the competition during the hunt, walked away confident of his success. Before leaving, he turned and, with a slight grin, firmly responded to the lady's playful words that there were no sick people in his family, and such conversations were of no interest to him at all, since he was confident in his origin and reputation. The handsome man's eyes narrowed in anger at the memory of imprinting on his soulmate. Theodore was ready to do everything so that no one could control his life and freedom, no matter the circumstances. Adelia watched in surprise as the carriage with the main character inside drove away into the distance, because in this novel, everything should have been different, He was ready to happily obey his beloved, but now his behavior was completely different. Suradale, who was standing nearby, happily answered his companion that the reward for winning the tournament was the elixir of life, which was not only rare, but also extremely valuable as a symbol of strength and good fortune. This magical bottle of magical water was capable of healing many wounds and even neutralizing dangerous poisons, making it an indispensable tool in the most critical situations. The lady stopped, completely dejected and confused, not understanding why the wolf family couldn't just buy such elixirs to heal themselves, since to her it seemed like an obvious solution to the problem. Suradale patiently explained that the creation of this substance was an extremely complex process, which is why it was almost impossible to buy, as such elixirs were very rare and required special conditions to produce. After which, with a blush on his cheeks, the handsome man proudly declared that it was he who had created this elixir of life, boasting of his achievement, which, in his opinion, could surprise everyone. However, the killer whale herself was not going to take part in the competition. She was simply interested in how other werewolves would fight each other for such a valuable thing, observing their reactions and behavior. Much of the continent was dependent on magic, and so everyone quickly began to respect the orcas, replacing anger with mercy, because behind their strength and powerful magic was hidden an important element of power and control. It turns out that the penguin's father was also discriminated against by the evil Beastman until a change in power finally corrected this injustice, opening up new opportunities for his family. Looking down, the man explained that he had to become stronger than those who craved chaos in order to protect the world, because only through strength could balance and peace be maintained in this broken world. Adelia was shocked to learn that Suradale carried a deep emotional trauma caused by his family being previously despised and considered weak, which left a mark on his heart and affected the rest of his life. His hand rose into the air, revealing a white sleeve with cuffs on his wrist, which elegantly framed his hand, adding even more elegance and severity to the image. The girl grabbed her companion by the sleeve of his clothes, trying to attract his attention. Her gesture was swift, but at the same time full of confidence and determination. With a supportive smile on her face, the aristocrat loudly said that the Vale family would be fine, because they had Suradale, a person who could protect and cope with any difficulties. Surprised, the guy froze in place from such words. His mouth opened in bewilderment, and his eyes opened wide, unable to believe the confidence with which she said it. It became known that with the help of the elixir of life, it was possible to save the life of the main character during an injury, since its magical properties could restore strength and heal even the most severe injuries. Standing in the square, Adelia thought about what she should do to save everyone without letting anyone die, and how she would be able to find a way that would lead to salvation. Suradale, putting his hand on his heart, told Adelia not to say such words again, because it was so easy to fall in love with her, and he did not want this to lead to unnecessary complications. Folding her arms across her chest, the girl loudly declared that she herself was not against participating in the competition to win a potion that could heal, and that she was ready to take risks for such an important goal. As soon as he heard about his companion's wish, the man immediately took out that very priceless potion and handed it to her as a gift to show his care and gratitude. The beauty stared at her reflection in the red liquid, lost in thought about how this moment could influence her future actions. The guy happily admitted that he would have undoubtedly spent the entire elixir just to heal the paper cut on the girl's skin, ready to make such sacrifices for her well-being. Embarrassed, pressing her hand to herself, Adelia frowned and ordered her companion not to be so kind to her, because she could accidentally hurt him, not wanting to cause pain. Leaning towards his interlocutor, Suradale offered her a deal. In exchange for the potion, she would be obliged to call him by his nickname so that he could enjoy this small and funny condition. Sweat ran down the lady's length, and she was shocked, not expecting such a reaction, but quickly came to her senses, deciding that she needed to act before the guy changed his mind. Quickly agreeing, the maiden gave him a short nickname and called him Sue, thus establishing some kind of light and funny connection between them. The aristocrat froze in surprise, not expecting such a quick agreement, and such a sweet, unexpected address to himself, and a slight confusion appeared on his face when he realized that everything that was happening did not quite correspond to his expectations. The beauty quickly hid the potion in the hem of her dress before her companion could change his mind, and calmly stared at him, knowing that his reaction would be important for further steps. At the nobleman's mutterings, Adelia ordered him to speak louder, since nothing could be heard, and her patience was running out, demanding clarity in his words. Suddenly, a sly and satisfied smile appeared on the handsome man's face, as if he had just caught her doing something that now gave him an advantage in their conversation. Afterwards, Cyrodiil admitted that he liked Adelia much more in human form than in penguin form, which was a surprising admission that revealed his hidden preferences. With her hands folded in front of her, the girl asked, confused and slightly jealous, why he had mentioned another werewolf to her, feeling her own emotions begin to boil at the comparison. Turning away from her interlocutor, Adelia demanded that Cyrodiil no longer talk about other people in front of her, feeling her mood change dramatically due to such an absurd accident. Time passed, evening came, and they returned to the Villa mansion, lovely and majestic, with its large white walls that shone in the rays of the setting sun, a symbol of comfort and safety for both of them. The young gentleman entered while inside the maids were busy with their daily household chores, creating an atmosphere of comfort and order in this noble place. The butler bowed respectfully to the aristocrats, showing respect and politeness, and asked how they had spent their time, as if wanting to know what they had been doing and how their day had gone. The aristocrat replied that everything was fine thanks to the company of his companion, and then learned that the head of the family had returned and was now spending time at the table, enjoying a quiet dinner after a long day. Adelia asked sheepishly if she could join them without being an official member of their family, worried about how her presence would be received in such an important and significant place. To this, Cyrodiil responded in the affirmative, adding that his father would most likely be interested in the new killer whale bride and would be glad to have her at the table, believing that her visit would only improve the atmosphere. After learning that the head of the Vale family looked like his son, the girl became excited about the upcoming meeting with the respected man, realizing that this was an important moment in her life. Having changed into a new dress, the girl resolutely headed towards the dining room, grabbing the door handle with her hand, feeling how her heart began to beat faster before the upcoming event. She was charming. She had a blue ribbon tied in her hair, a long dress flowing smoothly over her figure, and white gloves on her hands complemented her refined image, adding elegance to every movement. Cyrodiil complimented his companion on her new look, smiling as he noted how her transformation enhanced her beauty and grace, not missing the opportunity to emphasize how gorgeous she now was. The maiden did not fall for the praise, and, turning away, asked instructively where they should have gone, because she felt uncomfortable making the head of the family wait, realizing that such disrespect could leave a bad impression. The dining room was in another part of the house, and as they walked down the hall, they came to open doors through which a long table and neatly arranged chairs could be seen, creating an atmosphere of coziness and solemnity. A variety of delicious dishes were placed on the table, spreading a fragrant and delicious mixture of smells, which immediately attracted attention and created an atmosphere of coziness and sophistication. Bella sat at the table with her hair pulled back into a neat bun and smiled as she asked the young aristocrats to join them quickly, enjoying the moment of friendly communication and the upcoming meal. Adelia bowed respectfully, greeting the head of the Villa family, feeling respect and excitement at the meeting, and Cyrodiil easily introduced his father to her, trying not to miss the important moment. The boy's father was known to be a huge blue whale, and rumors circulated that he had long whiskers, which were a symbol of power passed down from generation to generation since ancient times. With her hands excitedly folded in front of her face, the girl eagerly awaited the sight of the head of the family's mustache and beard, as this moment for her was full of anticipation and slight intrigue, as if she was ready to reveal yet another secret of this mysterious world. The strong man carefully wiped his chin with a napkin, removing the remains of food, before looking up, his gaze full of respect and calm confidence, as if he was confident in his role and place in this house, without the need for unnecessary words. The young man then looked up at his son's new acquaintance, greeting her with a slight smile, showing politeness and interest in her presence, as if he already felt that she could play an important role in their lives. He was a handsome but grown man, with white hair, eyelashes, and eyebrows that resembled the features of his son. But, contrary to rumors, he did not have any mustache or beard, which was somewhat surprising. It came as a real shock to the lady when she saw what the blue whale looked like, with its imposing and majestic figure that immediately attracted attention, and its presence filled the room with a sense of power and dignity. Despite everything, the aristocrat not only had an impeccable appearance, but also an incredibly majestic aura that made him even more charming. His name was Fremo, and apparently he already knew that Adelia was the found orca. Grabbing the hem of her dress, the beauty carefully lifted it so as not to drop it, and with a slight bow introduced herself, showing politeness and respect, as if she had been in this place many times before, despite her outward shyness. After this, the guy, like a true gentleman, with complete courtesy, pulled out a chair and, not without a slight smile, helped the lady sit down at the table, confirming his manners and readiness to show her respect and comfort. The man had been watching the new lady in their house all this time with undisguised interest, closely following her every move, analyzing her behavior and manners. Suradale intervened in the conversation, gently but firmly telling his father that he was embarrassing the poor girl too much, unnecessarily straining her with his attention and majestic presence, which was clearly causing her discomfort and difficulty in communicating. The villa leader, a little embarrassed, apologized and explained that he had not interacted with other orcas for too long, as many as 30 years, and his mother was the only one who survived the previous tragic events, leaving him one of the few in his kind. In other families, such as wolves, black individuals led their race while grays and whites were subordinate to them, which was a characteristic feature of their social structure, based on power and hierarchy. Adelia apologized for her ignorance and asked with slight excitement what exactly had happened to the killer whales, that there were so few of them left, showing a sincere desire to understand the reasons for such a rare phenomenon in this world. Bella, with her head down, began to tell that before that very sinister incident, their race was so numerous that they could form a small village, living in peace and harmony without the threat of extinction. Angrily stabbing her fork into the dish, the lady angrily said that what had happened was unforgivable, and the hatred that emanated from these events was so deep that she could not ignore it. Adelia trembled with fear as she heard how the black sharks were to blame for the disappearance of the orcas, and her heart sank with horror as she realized the scale of the tragedy that had affected this race. Promising to tell her about it next time, and slightly dropping her cutlery, Bella thoughtfully asked the young aristocrat to be more careful, especially in the company of predatory sharks that could pose a danger. The head of the family hastened to reassure the girl, assuring her that, being part of their family, she also had the right to learn magic and use all the opportunities to protect herself in this dangerous world. The sun painted the sky in orange hues, like fire, as it slowly sank below the horizon, giving the entire large house a special beauty, and the lanterns along the road began to light the way. After the meal, the head of the family called the girl for a conversation, and she politely knocked on the door before entering the room, feeling a little nervous about the upcoming conversation with this respected man. When she walked inside, she immediately noticed that there were many bookcases, and the space looked like a real library, with each shelf filled with valuable knowledge hidden behind the covers. Standing with his back to the lady, the man apologized with slight regret for calling her into his office so late, but he wanted to check something, and it was important for him to discuss it at that moment. Adelia shuddered in horror when Fremo figured out her secret, discovering that she was not part of their family, and her secret was revealed suddenly, as if her carefully hidden past had come to light. Smiling, the man tilted his head slightly to the side, glad that he was right, and watched with satisfaction as his guesses were confirmed, filling him with a sense of confidence and victory. Being so attentive, he was able to distinguish her from the killer whales by the color of her hair, noticing that the strands of her hair were slightly different from those of the head of the family's wife, which immediately caught his attention. Lost in his thoughts, Fremo began to dream about his beautiful wife, who was so beautiful and sweet that every moment with her seemed magical and priceless. Having told about the drug that forcibly turned a person into a beast, the man asked the girl to come closer to him. Something in his voice or look clearly indicated his desire to continue this conversation in a more intimate setting. Reaching out his hand to the beauty, Fremo reassured her, assuring her that he had no intention of harming her, and that Adelia obviously had no bad intentions when she joined their family, seeing only honest intentions in it. Using magic to create a seal, the man added that there would be no pain, and the glow emanating from his fingertips filled the space, creating an atmosphere of confidence and protection. The noble maiden stared at the magic and spells in shock, her gaze full of surprise, as she did not expect to be involved in such a powerful and unusual magic that was unfamiliar to her. After learning the truth about the kidnapping, Fremo promised that he would not tell her secret to anyone if she answered his question honestly. His voice was calm but determined, waiting for her confession. With her arms outstretched, the lady confessed that she was in fact a penguin, and not a killer whale, thus revealing herself as the one Lanus was looking for. Revealing to Fremo the whole truth about her origins, the man laughed and said that now everything became clear and understandable to him. His son treated the penguin magician with such awe and affection that it became obvious even to him. Turning away in embarrassment, Adelia walked towards the exit, trying to quickly leave the room to avoid further awkward situations with the head of the Vila family and to calm down a little. Suddenly, a man's stern voice stopped her, and grabbing the door handle, the beauty froze, stuttering, and in confusion asked what exactly Fremo wanted from her at that moment. The lady turned, and the man began to say that he would leave the secret, deciding that it was better to remain silent than to reveal something that could affect their future, filling it with uncertainty and doubt. The girl realized that if Bella found out the truth, it would be too late for the penguin, because the adult woman would pierce the traitor's soft head with a fork without hesitation, without thinking about the consequences. The man unexpectedly suggested that the lady address him either by name or with respect, calling him father, which clearly raised the question of the boundaries of their relationship and showed his desire to establish special rules of communication, breaking the usual boundaries. The aristocrat recoiled in disgust, realizing that such an address was usually used only by daughters-in-law towards their husband's father, and it caused an internal protest in her, as if his words were trying to deprive her of her dignity and independence. With a straight face and a slight frown, Adelia agreed that she would now call the Vila family's head Mr. Fremo, feeling her inner discomfort gradually becoming more and more obvious. The handsome man himself was indeed very similar to his son, showing the same tactility and kindness towards his family, which only emphasized their similarity in behavior and character. The door slammed loudly, echoing throughout the large room, creating the feeling that the space around was filled with a deep silence and anticipation, as if everything had frozen in anticipation of what was about to happen in the next second. Left alone, Fremo put his hand to his face, thinking that things were only getting more interesting, since the girl's body contained the mana that was characteristic of his son, which opened up new horizons for further events. Suradale was a man whose magic was difficult to understand, but there was clearly something between these young people, some feelings that could not be hidden, even if they tried to do so. Adelia, unlike many, was not afraid of the guy, as usually happens when a predator and a victim meet, which made her reaction special and unusual for those who were familiar with such encounters. Even he and his wife were not immediately able to hide and eliminate their fear of the young man, and this was noticeable, despite all their efforts, which confirmed the presence of a certain tension. The strange thing was that, being a penguin, Adelia behaved so boldly and confidently towards the killer whale that her very behavior seemed unpredictable and even surprising to those who were familiar with her true nature. Fremo laughed loudly, not hiding his satisfaction, noting that even though the girl was not a killer whale, she could still become a very interesting daughter-in-law, giving the whole situation a touch of irony and light mockery. Suradale froze in shock, unable to immediately believe what he had just heard, and after a pause, he finally managed to say with difficulty that Adelia could also use magic, apparently with no less ability than he had expected. The girl's eyes lit up when she learned that, with mana, she too could create spells. And this news was so exciting that she could not hide her delight and surprise at such a prospect. However, she suddenly froze like a statue when the guy reminded her of her own lie from earlier, about introducing herself as a killer whale, a member of their family, which instantly brought her back to reality and questioned everything she had said before. Laughing awkwardly, Adelia added that she had an old dream since childhood, to learn how to wave a magic wand, and this thought always brought her joy, although she did not know where to start. She also wanted to know if the reason the guy was interested in her was related to her mana, or if it was something more, and her thoughts that perhaps her abilities played a major role in this did not leave her. Suddenly, a request was made. The aristocrat asked his companion to meet him again tomorrow in the library, which made the girl think that his offer concealed some purpose that he would like to discuss in a private setting. Cyrodiil explained that he had urgent matters to attend to, and so could not join her immediately, adding that he needed to complete important matters before returning to her company. The beauty awkwardly looked away, having learned that the interlocutor had been helping the wizard search for the missing penguin all this time, which suddenly put her in an awkward situation, and she felt a little superfluous. The girl muttered that the guy could do whatever he wanted with his eyes closed, and, with slight embarrassment, added that she herself would train to transform into a beast form, despite all the difficulties and doubts. Suddenly, the guy's hand lit up with a purple fire, which flared up with such brightness that it seemed as if magic itself filled the space around, casting a mystical glow on his face and hand. He had a gift for her, something special, and suddenly a small box appeared in the fire, surrounded by sparkling purple flames. There was a small precious ring in the box, and Cyrodiil decided to give it to her so that she could call on him for help at any time, no matter where she was. After that, the guy leaned closer and quietly whispered the words of the summoning spell to his companion, or rather, the very words that she had to say to summon him. Cyrodiil pulled back sheepishly and warned her with a smirk to be careful with the ring, as it was a one-time use ring, and once she used it, she wouldn't be able to summon it again. Standing opposite his interlocutor, the handsome man dropped to one knee and, with a sincere expression on his face, asked his lady if she would accept the ring and if she would be by his side from now on, sharing her life with him. Having received a refusal, the man, as if in complete despair, fell to the floor and changed his intonation, now playing the role of a subordinate who brought the stolen goods to his boss, adding notes of irony and humor to the situation. Adelia decided to play along, extending her hand towards her friend as if offering him a chance at redemption, and her gesture was full of lightness and calm laughter. The decoration was carefully placed on a woman's finger, hidden under a white glove, and the sparkle of the ring attracted attention, emphasizing her sophistication and grace. While the noblewoman was looking at her gift with interest, Cyrodiil, with a note of respect in his voice, asked the lady to allow him to touch her forehead, hoping for her permission, which became an important gesture for him. Offended by the beauty's suspicions, the guy restrainedly stated that he was simply worried about her health, and nothing more, trying not to reveal his inner irritation. The woman's hands wrapped around his strong male palm, as if seeking support and confidence in this moment. Their touch was soft but decisive. Adelia, feeling slightly embarrassed, placed the stranger's hand on the top of her head, closing her eyes from the lightness and at the same time nervous tension, which left her in a vulnerable state. A blush appeared on the nobleman's cheeks, which he could not hide despite all his efforts, and his face gave an unexpected reaction to what was happening, showing that he, too, felt this moment. Thus, the guy was able to finally make sure that the lady did not have any temperature, which once again confirmed his suspicions, while his own hands remained cold, despite the warm atmosphere around them. Laughing, Cyrodiil admitted that he sincerely liked not only the warmth of his companion's body, but also the way she responded to his touch, how sweetly and naturally her face reflected surprise, embarrassment, and slight confusion. The next morning, after a quiet night of reflection, Cyrodiil set out for the magic tower, his carriage slowly rolling along the winding road, taking him to this place where important matters awaited him that could influence everything that happened around him. The beauty, watching the nobleman leave, quietly called him a fool who did not notice the obvious, because the penguin he was so persistently looking for was right under his nose, and he did not realize it despite all his efforts. Previously, when the maiden could not control her beast form, she often cried on her bed at night, missing her father, and these moments of loneliness brought her pain, filling her soul with longing. At night, completely alone, disturbing thoughts again crept into the lady's head, and it was difficult for her not only to cope with them, but also to control her psychological state in order to remain in human form, which became a real test. The girl was so lonely that she could not control herself, and this feeling of helplessness and loneliness made her sad, filling her heart with pain that she could not relieve. Suddenly, there was a loud knock, and Kanu asked with slight excitement for permission to enter, his voice sounding confident but with a certain urgency, as if he already knew he was bringing something important. The knight had a large bag behind him, and he loudly announced that he had returned with his lady's request fulfilled, not hiding his satisfaction that he had been able to successfully complete what she had asked of him. There was clearly something alive moving in the bag, and when it suddenly fell to the floor with a dull thud, the atmosphere in the room became even more tense, as if something hidden and unknown had just appeared before them. Adelia covered her mouth with her hands in horror, realizing that it was because of her previous request that this had happened, and she couldn't shake the feeling of fear that the consequences of her decisions could be worse than she could ever imagine. The rope came undone, and the bag slowly opened, allowing everyone to see what was inside. And at that moment, Adelia felt her heart squeeze, realizing that she could not now undo what had been done. Ypres crawled out from there, all exhausted and tired. Her body was shaking and her breathing was heavy, as if she had gone through a long suffering before getting out of the bag. Every step she took was full of pain, but she still continued to move forward despite her exhaustion. The girl, without thinking, rushed to help the poor servant who was kidnapped and locked in a sack. Her heart was filled with sympathy, and she could not leave her in such a state. She felt that she had to help, because it was her duty as a friend and ally. The servant, waking up, suddenly opened her eyes. They were red with rage, and she could not contain her anger, realizing how cruelly she had been treated. Every memory of her captivity only added fuel to the fire of her resentment. The sister rushed at her brother, wanting to take revenge for his rude behavior, and her eyes burned with determination, because she could not forgive him for the way he treated her favorite servant. The maiden quickly beat her relative, stubbornly asking why he did this, desperately wanting to extract a confession from him, leaving him no chance to justify himself. The girl's face was filled with determination and a heavy expression, and she rudely announced that it would be wiser to return to the search for the master's daughter, namely the penguin, since that was the most important thing at the moment. Adelia realized that this was the perfect moment to confess to her former maid, and feeling that there would be no other chance, she asked Kanu to step outside for a few minutes so that the two of them could talk alone. When the girls were alone, the lady turned to Ypres, asking her if she recognized her, hoping that she would remember who she was and how much she had changed since they had not seen each other. After that, pointing her finger at herself, Adelia made a frank admission that she was the penguin everyone had been looking for, and her words hung in the air as if she had revealed a secret she had kept for a long time. Ypres clearly did not believe her, and, with a slight laugh, called the whole speech nonsense, considering it impossible, and not wanting to take the lady's words seriously, despite the fact that she seemed sincere. The beauty grabbed her interlocutor's hands sharply to stop her. Her movements were decisive and quick, as if she was trying to prevent something important that could change the course of their conversation. As a final argument, Adelia reminded her friend of the secret that only the two of them knew and no one else, forcing her to remain silent, because it was too important and dangerous to reveal. Quietly but confidently, she whispered in his ear the words that if it weren't for the money, the Archmage's child would have been dead long ago. And these words were like lightning that pierced the silence. Moreover, Adelia often took the blame for the maid, who often broke or smashed something, although the maid herself was to blame, and this became her way of protecting her from unnecessary punishments. The maid clutched her hair and begged the lady in horror to stop, and her words no longer seemed as nonsense as before, as she began to realize the seriousness of the situation. Having finally recognized her mistress, the servant almost cried with happiness, covering her face with her hands, all red, and her heart was filled with a feeling of gratitude and relief because she did not expect such a turn of events. After which, the maid admitted that she thought that Adelia would become the most aggressive and wild female penguin if she transformed, and not the sweet and fragile lady she actually was, which surprised her even more. Gently taking the mistress's hands in hers, Ypres asked why she had not returned home after her disappearance, not hiding her excitement because she was worried about the condition of Adelia, who did not behave as she had before. Suddenly, the girl's conversation was interrupted by a knight who burst into the room, asking in shock if the hostess was actually a penguin, having obviously overheard their conversation and not knowing what to do with this information. The man, stuttering, began to explain that he was worried because Adelia had not come out or made any sounds for a long time, and so he decided to go in and check on her, not suspecting what secrets were hidden behind the door. The beauty did not hesitate to order her maid to use her first command and get rid of the man who had learned her secret, realizing that this could jeopardize everything she had so carefully hidden. The knight obediently knelt down and raised his hands up in a sign of complete obedience, demonstrating his readiness to carry out any order he was given. The girl turned to the maid, asking how her father had felt since his daughter's departure, with slight anxiety, expecting an answer that might shed light on the condition of the person close to hers. It turned out that all this time, Linos had been walking like a corpse, neither alive nor dead. His condition was so disturbing that it seemed he existed between worlds, unable to find his way. Concerned, Ypres assumed that something had happened to the lady, that she had left home, or that someone had kidnapped her. But this assumption turned out to be wrong, and the reality was much more complicated. The truth turned out to be different. Adelia was afraid of her father's reaction to her human form, so she stayed in the villa house, pretending to be an orca, so as not to expose her true nature and not to provoke his anger. The maid, noticing her mistress's concern, immediately rushed to meet her, offering to return back to her home, where, in her opinion, Adelia could be safe and at peace. Looking down, Adelia declined with regret, saying that she couldn't go home because her father hated werewolves and she didn't want to be the cause of his anger and fear. Ypres, pressing her hand to her heart, said loudly that the master would not hate his daughter and would accept her as she was, despite her transformation, assuring that a father's love was stronger than all obstacles. The maid was hired by the master because only she could understand the penguin's speech and translate the animal's words to the wizard, which made her an indispensable and important figure in the house. Adelia turned away and admitted that she was afraid that she might be thrown into prison, a deep fear, because she could not predict how her father would react to her return and what they might do to her. At this point, Kanu intervened, curiously asking why Adelia spoke so well if she had only recently become human. Not understanding how such a quick adaptation could have happened, Ypres, leaning towards her brother in irritation, began to scold him, calling the lady a real genius because her ability to master human speech so quickly surprised and amazed her. Adelia, frowning, loudly announced that in any case, she had already been exposed by two people. And now the woman's secret was revealed, despite all efforts to keep it a secret. One of them was the head of Vale, who so persistently asked the cute girl to call him Daddy, knowing about her close relationship with his son and trying to use it for his own benefit or control. Ypres, having serious intentions, was ready to stay by her mistress's side, even if she had to leave the Tower of Magicians for her sake, without hesitating before difficult choices. In response to yet another angry comment from her brother, the sister could not restrain herself and rushed into a fight with him, deciding to teach him manners and show that she was ready to defend her mistress, despite his arrogance. They looked like children, pulling each other's hair and using mean tricks, but each was ready to defend their mistress to the end, sparing neither strength nor emotion. A plan had to be devised to save the protagonist, as the forest was deep, filled with many trees, and it hid dangers that could affect the outcome of events. Theodore would be injured the following week during a hunting competition, and this foreshadowing of the coming disaster became clearer as everything went according to plan. Time flew by, a nice day arrived, and the day of the hunting competition was just around the corner, full of anticipation and excitement, preparing everyone for the challenge ahead. The main character, with the same burning gaze, continued to search for the missing penguin, handing out posters and hoping that each new contact would bring her closer to solving this mystery. Adelia herself, slightly worried, asked her maid if she had seen her father's student, because she was an important part of the plan that only she could implement. Only Anemone could help save the protagonist and heal his wounds with her magic. But Adelia was ready to try to replace the protagonist, realizing that a lot depended on her in this situation too. The maiden had been carefully preparing for the day of the hunt, and a bag of things lay under her bed, waiting for the moment when everything was supposed to change, and she had to be ready for this test. But why on this particular day did Adelia become a penguin and not know how to return back to her human form, leaving her confused and completely uncertain about the future? Clutching his head, the animal began to run around the room in panic, not knowing what to do and not understanding how to cope with the sudden change that had overtaken him. Suddenly, there was a loud knock on the door, and Adelia felt her heart squeeze with tension, foreshadowing something important and possibly unpleasant, because she knew that meeting Cyrodiil could change everything. It was Cyrodiil who, as always, wanted to visit his sweet companion before leaving, but, approaching the door, he froze with his hand raised, not daring to knock, his gaze full of expectation and slight anxiety. As the man began to enter, the girl, seized with panic, rushed to seek shelter, trying to hide wherever her eyes looked. Her mind was full of anxiety, not knowing what was the best way to avoid the meeting. Footsteps were heard, and the aristocrat walked inside, not noticing how Adelia hid at the last second, her breathing so heavy that it seemed he could hear it. The lady, hiding under the bed, all wet from the effort, tried to calm her rapid breathing, while trying to remain completely silent, because her fear was so great that even the slightest noise could give away her location. Dumbfounded and unable to find the girl anywhere, the handsome man quickly turned around and left, slamming the door behind him so loudly that the sound echoed throughout the room, leaving only silence behind. The penguin, breathing a sigh of relief, fell on his back, breathing heavily, his heart almost stopping from fear, and every muscle in his body tensed to the limit, as if he had barely survived the danger. The guy froze right at the door, in no hurry to leave, his hands clenched into fists, and he could not contain his emotions, standing in complete silence and thinking about what had just happened. There was a blush on his cheeks that didn't go away, and a laugh escaped his mouth, nervous and light, as if he himself hadn't expected to find himself in such a situation. In his hand, he held a purple memory ball, which he was determined to keep for the rest of his life, knowing that this moment would be something important to him, something he would remember again and again. He didn't expect to see such a cute scene from the very morning, when the girl, having turned into a penguin, tried to hide under the bed, leaving only her tail sticking out from under the blanket, which looked so touching and funny. Cyrodiil, feeling his heart clench at the sight, hid the important thing in his jacket, mentally asking his beloved for forgiveness for not being able to truly understand her experiences and feelings at that moment. In a cheerful mood, the man went about his business, walking along the corridor of the mansion. His steps were confident, and his face expressed satisfaction, as if he was completely absorbed in his thoughts and task. Adelia only breathed a sigh of relief when she returned back to her human form, feeling the heavy burden lifted and her body returning to its normal state. After that, she immediately headed to the hunting competition, where there were already many tents pitched in the forest, and people were preparing for battle, immersed in preparation, full of excitement and anticipation. Bella was also there, dressed in her training uniform, her hair tied back, her gaze focused, and her movements confident, like a true professional. Smiling sweetly in her new white and pink dress, Adelia asked the woman with slight excitement if she could go to the water, hoping for her permission and feeling the light breeze rustling her hair. The aristocrat gave her permission, gently running her hand through the young girl's hair before doing so, as if comforting and showing her concern, and then allowed her to go to the water, Understanding that this was an important moment for her, she also handed her charge a flare, pointing to the mountain where there was water, assuring her that it was a safe place. But extra caution would not hurt, because the situation could be unpredictable. In the original story, when Theodore launched such a rocket, it failed to work because someone had sabotaged it beforehand, casting doubt on the reliability of the method and leaving many questions about who would do such a dirty trick and why. Accompanied by the knight Kanu, the maiden thanked the woman for her help and set off, knowing that an important and dangerous stage of their journey lay ahead, where every step could be decisive for their survival and the success of the mission. The forest was large and dense, with many trees, and the scent that filled the air was pleasant and fresh, creating an atmosphere of solitude and peace despite the trials that lay ahead. The guard obediently followed his mistress, but he was haunted by one question that haunted him throughout the entire journey, making him wonder what he might have missed or what else this path was hiding. Looking back, he asked if it was really necessary to take the maid with him, or rather, his sister, who was walking behind and carrying a heavy bag, clearly tired from the load. The subordinate began to watch attentively as the hostess opened the bag and began to take something out of it, curiously trying to understand what she was cooking. The lady put on a dark cloak and black gloves on her hands. Her image became even more mysterious and strict, as if she was preparing for something important and dangerous. She also asked her maid for 2 potions. One changed the color of the eyes, and the other, the color of the hair. Both potions worked for about 15 minutes, and she was sure that their use would help her in the future. The beauty drank both elixirs in one gulp, leaving not a drop. Her gaze was focused, and her movements were decisive, as if she was preparing for some decisive meeting. Thus, the girl decided to change completely so that no one would recognize her, and she could save the main character, hiding under a new identity that would not reveal her true nature. Now the aristocrat's eyes were the color of flame, bright and unusual, replacing their previous blue hue, which added a certain magical and mystical atmosphere to her appearance. If someone noticed another person just because they saved him, it meant that this person was in love with their savior, like the main character in the novel who couldn't help but feel that way. Theodore was mad with his love and went to unnecessary extremes, ready to do anything to prove his affection, even if it destroyed his mind and morals. The servants asked in bewilderment why their mistress intended to hide her face, not understanding what had caused such a decision. The girl explained that she was afraid that someone would notice her too quickly at first glance, and therefore decided to completely change her appearance in order to remain unnoticed and safe. After this, she strictly ordered her subordinates to carry out her orders without asking any questions, even if they had any doubts, emphasizing that her decisions must be carried out without question. Kanu stepped forward and reminded that he was there to protect the lady from all harm and scammers, and that it was his duty to ensure her safety in any situation, no matter the circumstances. Adelia, making an angry and serious face, said that she was an important person and could stand up for herself without needing anyone's protection, showing her confidence and independence. The road led into the forest, among tall trees, creating an atmosphere of mystery and anticipation, as if they were heading to an unknown place that hid its secrets and dangers behind green curtains of foliage. And the hunt began, where people fought with werewolves and animals not for life, but to the death, fighting for their destiny, because not only their lives depended on their victory, but also the future of those who were with them and possible freedom from the impending threat. Kanu and his sister, standing nearby, froze in surprise, learning that they were going into the very depths of all nightmares, where even brave hearts did not dare to step. And then, shocked, the knight cried out, unable to hide his shock. The mountains and fresh air filled their lungs, as if nature itself was reminding them that they were on the threshold of something dangerous and unknown, preparing for the upcoming trials. The knight followed his mistress, trusting in her strength, but still worried about her safety, for the forest was inhabited by huge, ferocious beasts ready to attack anyone who dared to cross their territory. Suddenly, there was a noise from the bushes, and a terrible beast with huge fangs and red eyes pounced on Kanu, its growl sounding like a harbinger of trouble. It was not just an animal, but a real monster with giant teeth, ready to tear and rip apart everything that came its way, creating an atmosphere of horror and unpredictability. Drawing his sword from its sheath, Kanu asked the lady to stay behind, assuring her that he would be able to safely protect her, as her safety was his top priority in such a situation. Adelia, playing the role of the victim, shouted loudly that she trusted her guardian, and while he was fighting, she would run to a place where she could hide, showing her determination to act. Several minutes passed, but when the brave knight turned back, he found that the girls had already fled, running away with their feet, leaving him alone with the monster. With his mouth wide open, the man was left alone with a real monster, his heart beating faster, and his mind trying to figure out how to deal with this threat, having no other choice. When the maid asked why they went to this dangerous place, the beauty replied that she was here to save one important person. Her voice was decisive, and in her intonation there was an urgent need to fulfill her mission. Since the story had already deviated from the original, there was a possibility that Theodore would not be a victim of the attack, and his fate could have been completely different from the previous scenario. Suddenly, the maid noticed that in the distance someone was lying bleeding, and Adelia turned her head sharply, her heart beating faster with anxiety, because she immediately understood that this was something important. There, near the tree, lay Theodore, his shoulder covered in blood and breathing heavily, his condition serious, his expression full of pain and fatigue. The noblewoman firmly said that she would go and test the man with a spell. Her voice was full of determination, and she knew that her actions had to be quick and precise. She had to be careful, because there might still be mercenaries or wild animals nearby that had hurt the poor guy, and she had to take into account all possible threats along the way. The lady was most afraid of becoming another cliché from a novel, where Theodore falls in love with her when she accidentally falls and hits a rock, and this moment brings them tenderness and passion, as in the most banal stories. Rising from her seat, the noblewoman walked towards the wounded man to check on his health. Her steps were quick, and there was concern on her face, because she could not remain indifferent to his condition. Ypres, smiling tenderly, said loudly that she trusted her mistress, and a touching moment occurred between the mistress and the servant, which strengthened their bond, because they understood each other without words. It was strange to watch how people around them reacted to someone else's obsession and hid it from everyone, as if they were trying to create a mask of normality, despite hidden feelings and secret emotions. The girl started to say that once they got out of here, everything would change. But then she fell silent, not knowing how to finish her thought, because she couldn't say for sure what exactly would happen after they escaped. After which the lady fell silent, hiding her emotions for a moment, and putting on a mask of imperturbability, walked away from the servants towards the wolf, her steps becoming more decisive and confident. The man was unconscious, sitting with his eyes closed and breathing heavily, his body barely moving and each breath coming with difficulty, as if he was fighting for his life in this state. In the hands of the beauty was a potion of life, which she wanted to use on the wounded, handsome man by the tree. Her thin fingers nervously clutched the bottle, feeling the weight of an important choice. The elixir poured like a stream onto the boy's open wound, and as soon as the liquid touched his skin, magic occurred, healing him, restoring his strength, and removing traces of injury, as if magic was reviving him. The girl carefully closed the bottle, in which there was a little healing potion left, realizing that this was the only chance, and now she needed to be ready for further steps. But suddenly, Theodore grabbed the girl by the hand, demandingly asking what she was doing, his voice full of anger and bewilderment, as if he could not understand why she made such decisions. The heroine pushed him away, angrily calling him a rude man who repaid her kindness and salvation so poorly. Her voice was full of disappointment, and her gaze aimed straight at his face, not hiding her resentment. Turning away, Theodore shouted that he hadn't asked to be saved, and ordered the girl out of sight, his voice full of irritation and pride, as if he thought he was strong enough to handle it on his own. Grabbing the stubborn wolf by the fur, Adelia decided that despite his resistance, she would save him, even if he did not like her help, because she knew that this was the only chance. With her hand, she carefully opened the guy's mouth and began to pour the liquid inside, which flowed over his lips, feeling how his body began to gradually react to her actions. Theodore coughed, and only now was convinced that the maiden had given him not poison, but a healing remedy, realizing that she had really tried to help, despite his resistance and anger. Suddenly, a hand in a black glove extended forward. Its movements were quick and decisive, as if there was not the slightest doubt in the woman's actions, and her every gesture was full of confidence and purposefulness. The empty bottle fell to the ground with a loud thud, but without breaking, its metallic sound echoing in the silence, adding tension to the moment, as if every sound in this space was important and could change the course of events. Theodore pulled his savior by the hand, bringing her closer to him so that she was right in his arms, and he couldn't help but want to make her feel safe. The young couple's eyes met. Their faces were so close that their breath became one, and in that moment the world around them seemed to disappear, leaving only the two of them. Embarrassed, and with a blush on his cheeks, Theodore carefully asked the name of his savior, the man's voice sounding a little softer than usual, because he felt how much their moment of meeting had changed. The girl's worst nightmare came true, and that very cliché from books happened, when the main character unexpectedly falls in love with the girl who saved him, which she always tried to avoid, because now she has to face the inevitable. Ypres came to her mistress's aid with a heavy object in her hand, ready to strike anyone who dared to harm her mistress, her eyes full of determination, and her body tense as a string, ready to act at any second. Theodore clearly wasn't expecting this turn of events, and his face instantly changed to one of horror, as he realized that not only did he have to deal with the situation, but he now had to somehow interact with the one who saved him, changing everything he knew. The sky was bright and blue. The birds were flying happily, creating a sense of fun and carefreeness, while the trees around smelled fresh, giving a sense of peace despite the tension of what was happening. The two girls stood to the side, unsure of what to do now, their eyes full of questions, as they found themselves in the middle of events that could change everything, and neither of them were prepared for what came next. The wolf leader was resting under a tree, his head covered with a large bump from the heavy blow the maid had dealt him, and he was still trying to recover from the aftermath of the collision. Ypres believed that Theodore wanted to do a romantic act, trying to show his courage and care, but in her opinion, his intentions were too naive and inexperienced. The bored beauty sighed and said that she had to make sure that the guy really hadn't left a mark on her, because she couldn't trust words without seeing real actions. When the owner asked to examine it, the maid explained that the mark was usually placed when the bare skin of two people came into contact, and everything happened as if by itself, without unnecessary words or explanations. When asked how she knew so much about werewolves, the servant looked away mysteriously, not answering the question, her silence only increasing the mystery that surrounded her personality. Ypres also remembered another important piece of information from an ex-boyfriend who once worked for the Wolf family, and this information concerned strange traditions and signs that could tell a lot about what was happening inside the family. There were rumors that the head of a werewolf family could have a moon mark under his collarbone if he had already marked someone as his mate, and this was not just a mark, but an important symbol confirming their connection. A joyful Adelia shouted that the girl was more useful than the stupid Kanu, which greatly embarrassed Ypres, because her words sounded like a revelation, and she did not expect such frankness from her mistress. The lady walked quickly towards the man to examine him, feeling the need to find out the truth and figure out what was really going on without any unnecessary guesswork. However, the guy's collarbone and his body were completely clear, without any pattern or mark, which confirmed that he was not marked by anyone, and everything they were worried about had no basis in reality. The girls breathed a sigh of relief when their worst assumptions were not confirmed, and they realized that their fears were unfounded. In the servant's head, a complex love triangle had already matured, where two young men, each with their own unique traits, fought for the love of the young mistress, striving to win her heart and capture her attention. Despite all the obstacles that arose between them, one of them, a cold prince, known for his cruelty and cold-bloodedness, was in love with a penguin. His feelings were so strong that they were not subject to either his harsh character or cruel circumstances. The second was a wild wolf, wild as nature itself, who, despite his cruelty, was ready to trust the maiden who had healed him, because she had been able to lead him out of a very difficult situation and restore his strength, and now he felt grateful to her. And the main character was Adelia herself, embarrassed by such constant attention and not knowing who to choose between the two, both of whom were not only attractive to her, but also mysterious, causing conflicting feelings. Adelia just winced and shuddered, feeling how often the maid tried to set her up with someone, not realizing that there was enough tension in her life without interfering in her personal relationships, and the choice was left entirely up to her. Moreover, in her opinion, Mr. Suradale behaved in a personal and reserved manner, showing genuine respect and care towards the lady, which only emphasized his good intentions and good upbringing, despite the circumstances. Adelia brushed it off, saying that the guy was only interested in her because he thought she was a killer whale like him, and that his feelings had no real basis, but were only based on external assumptions. Yprus, however, insistently reminded that Suradale was also known for his great love of penguins, which made his interest in her somewhat more logical when considered in light of his past hobbies. Turning away, the aristocrat firmly stated that the guy would hate her in any case when he found out that all this time she had been lying, pretending to be someone else, and that his disappointment would be inevitable. In his black-gloved hand was a signal fire, ready for action, which could be the decisive signal in deciding their fate. A bright fireworks display burst into a pink flash in the sky, illuminating the moment and giving the situation a sense of solemnity, as if something important was about to happen. The knights were due to arrive soon, following the signal, to take them from the forest, including the poor wolf lord who lay unconscious under a tree, resting after all the events he had experienced. And before the guy woke up, the beauty pulled the hood tighter over her face and called the maid to come with her, deciding that it was time to leave and move on without wasting a minute. The forest was filled with the pleasant scent of trees, and along the path covered with stones, their steps sounded soft and did not disturb the silence of the surrounding world. Kanu was deeply exhausted after the battle with the monsters. His strength was exhausted, and he could barely walk, but the joy of the upcoming meeting with the lady supported him, giving him his last strength. With tears on his cheeks, the boy whispered that Adelia could have taken him with her instead of the knight's sister, his voice full of regret and despair, because he felt not as useful as he would like. The guard was beside himself, so worried about the young lady, and when he saw the signal fire in the sky, his tender heart sank, because he knew that this could be the last warning of possible danger. Adelia, raising her index finger up, smiled happily and said that Kanu fulfilled his role as a guard, saving her from a wild boar, thereby not only protecting her, but also supporting his friend in a difficult moment. The man was embarrassed by the praise, not realizing that he had just become a victim of manipulation by a cunning penguin who skillfully directed his reaction in the right direction, forcing him to believe in his gratitude. Suddenly, something strange happened. Too many people gathered in the camp, although previously there were only a few people there, which made everyone wary and feel that something important was approaching. Bella and her husband, agitated and worried, walked back and forth. Their behavior was anxious, as if they were expecting something bad or unusual. When the woman raised her face up, she froze. Seeing the girl, her gaze froze, and all thoughts were interrupted for a moment, because this was something unexpected for her. Bella walked quickly towards the beauty she had been worried about all this time, her expression speaking of concern and an urgent need to know what had happened to her. She asked anxiously where the young lady's flare had been, expecting to hear an explanation that might clear up the situation, and there was a note of alarm in her voice, as if the flare was the key to resolving all the misunderstandings that had arisen. The noblewoman hesitated for a moment, then showed the rocket that belonged to the wolf lord, which she took with her, not wanting to leave important things unattended at such a dangerous time. The grown woman, hearing this, calmed down and sighed with relief, feeling that the tension she had been experiencing was finally going away. At that moment, Adelia felt awkward, as she did not understand how she had deserved such kindness from an unfamiliar aristocrat, and her heart was filled with doubts, not knowing how to properly respond to the care shown. Adelia consoled herself with the fact that the grown lady was worried about her for a reason, but because she considered her to be the same kind of killer whale as herself, and this created a feeling of kinship, even if they had just met. Kanu appeared suddenly from behind the girl, his voice full of concern as he asked if she was okay. Noticing that she looked somewhat confused, and as if she wasn't quite herself, which made him feel uneasy. Adelia waved her hand slightly and said she felt fine, wrapping her arms around herself, trying to hide the feelings that still remained inside, because she didn't want to show her vulnerability. The noblewoman, noticing her worries, sympathized with the little girl, learning that she was really worried about how long werewolves could remain in human form, because for her it was a big burden. The maiden did not deny the truth, remembering the morning when she had, with great difficulty, returned to her human form, leaving behind the image of a penguin, and despite her efforts, she still felt the effects of these transformations. Suddenly, unexpectedly for everyone, the news was announced that a banquet and ceremony would soon be held in the Eagle family, and this news caused a wave of discussion and anticipation, because for everyone, it was a significant event that was awaited with great interest. After which, Bella suggested returning to their family island as soon as possible after the holiday, with a consoling smile, which, however, only caused horror in the lady, because she had a presentiment that this decision would bring her even more trouble. The head of the family stood behind and had no intention of helping the maiden, even knowing her secret. Instead, he supported his beloved's idea, believing that her decision was correct and most beneficial for everyone. Bella became indignant and turned to her husband, saying that he should have stayed at home and looked after the family's affairs, since his place was near the affairs and duties, and not in matters that concerned their personal interests. But earlier, the man had made a vow that he would not reveal any secrets, and would wait until the beauty herself decided when and how she would tell everything, which made him feel like he was expecting something inevitable. Suddenly, knights appeared carrying the Wolf Lord on a stretcher, screaming for help and demanding a doctor, creating panic and anxiety in the camp, because no one knew what condition he was in or what injuries he might have received. The people standing nearby looked at the wounded werewolf man in horror and whispered, creating new rumors about what could have happened to him, because his condition seemed so mysterious and alarming. Adelia also turned her head to look at the fallen warrior, along with the family of orcas, her gaze filled with worry and concern, as she couldn't understand what was happening to someone who had always been so strong. Theodore was still lying unconscious, still looking handsome even in his sleep, his face calm and peaceful despite the strong blow he had received from the lady, and his body was now in a state of rest. The white bedroom was luxuriously furnished with expensive furniture and accessories, and the bed, surrounded by soft fabrics, stood in the center, creating an atmosphere of coziness and tranquility in this high-class space. While the beauty was tidying up her appearance, putting on jewelry, Kanu stood behind her, a loyal knight, quietly watching her actions, ready to support and protect her at any moment. Coughing into her fist, she asked the man if they had found any evidence, her voice tense and her face impatient, because every detail was important. Hearing the negative answer, Adelia remembered how the maid had dealt a heavy blow with the umbrella and left a bump on the Wolf Lord's head. Her memories of what happened were vivid and painful. Suddenly, when the girl was about to leave her chambers, she encountered her annoying friend, who suddenly appeared on her way, and his presence was unexpected. Suredale stopped in the doorway and immediately asked where his interlocutor was heading. His voice was calm, but there was a slight wariness in it, as if he was worried about her intentions. Thoughtfully placing his hand to his chin, he began to recall if they had a date scheduled that day, his thoughts quickly going over the events, trying to remember what exactly was planned. Kanu, unable to bear it, intervened in their conversation, asking if they really were dating and a couple, his voice sounding with obvious surprise and his gaze full of bewilderment. Suredale couldn't help but show off, and showed off the wedding rings on his fingers, making a lie as if he was trying to breathe in her face, showing his pride for their happy relationship. Adelia immediately remembered the gift jewelry that the cunning killer whale had given her, and the realization came to her like lightning piercing her entire body. She couldn't even imagine that all this would look as if she and the guy were married. She stared at the ring on her finger in horror, feeling the cold metal penetrate her soul, like a symbol of something inevitable that now forever connected her to this moment, causing her heart to squeeze with fear and doubt. The beauty could not restrain herself and began to swear at her companion, shouting that she thought he really cared about her. But now she realized how wrong she was in her feelings. When asked why he came to the maiden's team, Cyrodiil replied that his body lacked the presence of his beloved, which caused his happiness level to drop, which sounded like an excuse he made up himself. The maiden raised an eyebrow imperturbably at the aristocrat's words, noticing that he had not come to her empty-handed, but with some interesting proposal, which immediately attracted her attention. Leaning closer to the noblewoman, Cyrodiil whispered that he would tell her everything only when the faithful knight left, leaving them alone, his words sounding mysterious and intriguing. There was a playful smile on the guy's face and a blush on his cheeks, as if he himself was enjoying this moment when they were so close to each other, creating an atmosphere of tense anticipation between them. Thus, Kanu quickly found himself outside the door, standing alone, not knowing what to do next in this unexpected situation. Cyrodiil helped the lady sit down on the chair, and then confessed that he always wanted to touch the beauty's dark hair and feel it. His words sounded with slight excitement, as if it was something important to him. The noblewoman, looking at her locks, admitted that she never had much time to take care of them, and therefore her hair was a little careless, but still beautiful. The man's hand gently touched her hair, and he offered his help, clearly understanding how important it was to her and how her hair could become even more beautiful with his help. And so, a few minutes later, the girl's hair was braided into pigtails by the skillful hands of a master wizard, who deftly and confidently coped with the task, making her image even more sophisticated. Adelia, slightly embarrassed, with a blush on her cheeks, asked the guy to come tomorrow and do her hair again in the same way. Her voice was soft, but full of gratitude. Cyrodiil smiled and promised that he would definitely come the next day to help the lady with her routine, and she could be sure of his help, despite all the difficulties. The beauty looked back at the aristocrat from behind, and for a moment it seemed to her that his feelings began to change. It was as if he was in love with her, and this feeling did not leave her, although she was not sure of his intentions. The nobleman accepted the gratitude from his interlocutor and said goodbye to her, saying that they would see each other again tomorrow. His words were soft, but there was a sense of determination in them, as if he wanted this moment to be meaningful. Some time had passed since the hunting competition, and life on the city streets went on as usual. The houses stood in their places, and people continued to go about their daily business, unaware of what was happening outside their familiar world. And the lady finally decided to tell everything to her maid, sitting in a cafe at a nice table with desserts, where, despite the light atmosphere, she was preparing to reveal an important secret. She told about the penguin's reincarnation, and even about how their world was just a story from a novel. Her words sounded so calm that it seemed like she had already accepted all these oddities as part of her reality. Ypres asked again with distrust about all the things from the modern world, her eyes searching for confirmation, but the girl believed the lady only after a long explanation, when all doubts were dispelled. Laughing and raising her hand, the servant called her mistress very smart and educated. Her words were full of respect and admiration, because she always saw in her mistress not just a woman, but also an outstanding person. Now, not alone, Adelia discussed with her friend the attack on the leader of the wolves and wondered who could have committed such an act, because it was too carefully planned and dangerous an action to leave no traces. Suddenly, lowering her head, the beauty said that she had long wanted to check something with the help of a silver video camera. She felt that the moment had come to reveal another secret that could shed light on what was happening. They wanted to know who Cyrodiil really was, and what kind of personality he hid behind his sweet smile, because all his actions and words seemed too perfectly chosen to be sincere. After Theodore was defeated in the attack, Adelia realized that the events of the novel were progressing as usual, and therefore the plague and other disasters were soon to come as predicted, although no one knew at what point exactly this would happen. People suffered, and their grief was clearly described in the novel, But there was a lack of important information about what exactly caused the epidemic and how its consequences might affect everyone who fell under its terrible influence. The whale family and their huge mansion were mentioned only occasionally in the book. Their history remained in the shadows, although this family was known in the world for its strength and wealth. The beauty's hand clenched as it lay on the table next to the cup, her fingers nervously playing with its rim, as if she was trying to collect her thoughts, not knowing how to start a conversation. Cyrodiil was highly suspicious due to his impenetrable appearance and unusual character, which made him even more mysterious and sometimes even frightening for those who tried to understand him. The maid couldn't agree that the wizard was perfect in everything, because no matter how much she tried to understand him, she couldn't get rid of the feeling that there was something hidden in him, as if he was more than just a magician. Ypres raised her hand to her face and asked hesitantly if the lady thought that Cyrodiil might be involved in underground black business, her voice full of doubt, because everything that surrounded him seemed too complicated to understand. The noblewoman lowered her head and admitted that she was not sure, but she wanted to figure everything out and find out what her friend was hiding, because her intuition told her that his secrets could be deeper than it seemed at first glance. It was strange to see all the werewolves bowing their heads before the killer whale, but her charms had no effect on the Lady Penguin, who remained indifferent and steadfast in the face of this display of power. The girl did not immediately understand what her servant was talking about, since all this time she believed that Cyrodiil was just an ordinary stalker and nothing more, not giving him the significance that he was trying to instill in her. After all, even as a penguin, she was not afraid of the killer whale or other animals, being ready to bite everyone with her sharp beak if they even tried to scare or threaten her. Ypres raised her finger in a moralistic manner and suggested that fearlessness was a characteristic feature of all little penguins. These cute and charming, seemingly harmless animals were actually real monsters inside, capable of many things. A memory appeared in his head where Frimo was so fascinated by the fact that the girl who moved into their house had magical mana inside her body, which made her even more attractive in his eyes. Adelia brushed those thoughts aside and insisted that their first priority was to prevent the plague and save her father, which was more important than anything else that could happen. The maid's hands touched her mistress's fingers in support, her gesture quiet but full of confidence that she would be there, no matter what the difficulties. The lovely Ypres leaned forward and promised that she would do everything she could to help her mistress. Those words were full of determination and confidence, as if she was ready to sacrifice anything for her well-being and safety. After which, with a smile, she added that since she got a job in the house of the mistress's father, she had made many pure-blooded friends who were very dear to her and were ready to help in difficult times. In the end, they agreed that they should find a healing master, a little crazy, but a genius, because it was people like that who could help in their situation. The maid's face turned cold, and she loudly declared that she knew someone in mind who was suitable for this role. Her confidence was obvious, and she was ready to offer a solution. Adelia slowly rose from her seat, realizing who the loyal servant was referring to. Her eyes filled with understanding, and she felt that this man could be the key to solving their problem. The maiden hastened to reassure her mistress, for she had confided her secret to her, and now Ypres felt that she must repay the trust with kindness. Adelia often defended the maid, even in her penguin form, because she always believed that caring for others does not depend on appearance and strength, but on inner determination. Hugging her mistress, the maid loudly declared that this time she wanted to protect her mistress herself, her voice full of determination, as if she was willing to give everything for this. The beauty, without thinking twice, reciprocated her friend's touch, hugging her even tighter, feeling her heart fill with gratitude and warmth. The maid laughed, and it was a warm moment when two ladies shared tenderness, because at such moments their connections became even stronger, and their emotions sincere. Ypres walked down the city street with her hat on, her steps confident, but her thoughts full of anxiety. She thought about her lady's previous words, trying to understand their true meaning and perhaps the hidden feelings that remained behind the words. Earlier in the meeting, the lady appeared very nervous, constantly fiddling with her hands and shifting from foot to foot, which indicated her inner anxiety and tension, which she was trying to hide. Ypres' steps suddenly stopped, and her shoes clanked on the stonework, creating sharp and clear sounds that echoed through the deserted street, as if to emphasize her inner thoughts. The servants, frozen in surprise, recognized an old acquaintance who appeared as if from nowhere. His unexpected appearance made her think that perhaps something important was hidden behind this. Next to her stood a happy Suradale, who, smiling sweetly, introduced the maid as his beloved, and his words sounded with a slight warmth, as if he was proud to be able to be near her. The girl bowed politely in greeting the young gentleman. Her movements were calm and refined, as befits the presence of an aristocrat, and her posture conveyed a grace that befitted her high position and upbringing. Suradale just laughed at the maid's words, saying that the little penguin was not in any danger in his house. His tone was light and casual, as if he did not feel any threat to himself or his beloved. It turned out that the guy knew from the very first day that Adelia was not a killer whale, and this discovery surprised everyone, because his hidden knowledge about her true nature remained a secret until now. Ypres lowered her head, telling in turn that she submitted her resignation because she was afraid for the young lady. She was worried that she would be discovered and found to cause harm. Suradale offered a solution. The girl could come to their house and get a job as their servant, at work, and the guy was ready to accept her, offering her protection and support. The reason for such a kind offer was that he thought that Adelia would feel more comfortable if her old friend was nearby, who could support her in difficult times. Ypres did not think long and agreed, accepting the generous offer, feeling that this decision would bring peace and stability, both for her and for the lady, confident that such a change would create new opportunities and protect them from unnecessary worries. The only thing Suradel asked was not to tell the beauty that he had long ago revealed her secret, as he wanted to personally see her reaction and watch her face turn red from embarrassment. Adelia, if she had reacted so cutely back then, while in her penguin form, would most likely have avoided the meeting, hidden and blushed with shame, which would have made the moment even more touching and funny. Since Ypres herself became interested in seeing the lady's reaction, she extended her hand and accepted the aristocrat's offer, asking him to tell her everything in detail later, because she was curious to know how it all happened. The carriage, meanwhile, was slowly driving through the streets of the city, and the coachman seemed to be immersed in his thoughts, carefully watching the road, not noticing how the events around him were unfolding before his eyes, as if the world filled with events was only a background for him. Adelia, sitting in the carriage and looking out the window, asked the maid how far away that crazy healer they needed so much lived. Her voice was full of expectation and some hope for a quick solution to the problem. The maid clapped her hands as if she remembered something, and next to her sat her brother, the knight, silently listening attentively to the girl's speech, his gaze focused as if he was trying to catch every word. There were also rumors that the leader of the wolves would not appear at the eagle ceremony, as he had not left his house since the hunt, and this all seemed strange, especially considering the importance of the event and his usually public behavior. The maid, shyly pressing her hands to her cheeks, expressed the thought that the man had probably fallen so deeply in love with his mistress that he could not forget her. His feelings, in her opinion, were so strong and persistent. Moreover, Ypres still hoped to see a real love triangle between two handsome men and a sweet lady, because it would add intrigue and interest to what was happening. Upon hearing that there was an old legend about werewolves, Adelia became interested and asked to tell her more about it, leaning forward with lively interest, as if she wanted to understand all the details of this mysterious story. The tale goes that long ago, in ancient times, there was a black wolf who fell in love with a human, a beauty who walked through the fields with a basket. Her innocent and attractive appearance captivated his heart, making him forget everything else. One day, realizing that his love could not be realized, he made a deal with a demon to become human and gain the opportunity to be with his beloved, hoping that this move would give him a chance to be with her forever. However, the demon, as always, demanded a price for fulfilling his wish. His smile was cold and mocking, as if he knew that the price for such magic would be much higher than the wolf could imagine. And the price was the wolf's feelings, which were passed on to his descendants, turning them not only into bearers of his legacy, but also into people who were connected to this magic and its consequences for generations, feeling the burden within themselves. At first, squealing with excitement, Ypres began to speak loudly of the marks that werewolves received when they found their chosen one, her words sounding tense, as if she were trying to convey an important truth. Adelia, in turn, did not understand where exactly these beastmen came from. If they had previously talked about the difference in marks, the woman's gaze was full of bewilderment, because all this seemed too complicated and confusing to her. Kanu sighed heavily and explained that, unfortunately, the tale had an unhappy ending. His voice was sad, because he knew that this story would not be about a happy fate. The Black Wolf and the Beauty started a family. They had a child, and they lived happily, enjoying every moment of their new life, despite all the difficulties they had to face. However, the locals did not accept them, considering the husband a monster. Their fear of the unknown and prejudice led to alienation, and the family was forced to hide from public condemnation. They also hated the poor child, throwing stones at him, not sparing even his small body, full of innocence, and their cruelty knew no bounds, as if they did not see him as a living person, but only an object for their evil and merciless actions. And one day, the boy was brutally beaten and lay motionless, leaving this world, leaving his father in grief and despair, because it was a moment he could not survive. On this day, the father again turned to the demon with a new request, namely to fill the continent with werewolves, hoping that this would bring him strength and the opportunity to avenge the death of his son. Kanu ended the story by saying that from then on, the Beastmen began to appear as a result of the deal that the Black Wolf made, and their appearance became a symbol of the fact that the price for such power was terrible. Adelia, thinking, recalled and asked what price the demon took for this new incarnation of the wolf, because she felt that for every action in this story, there was a hidden price that would have to be paid someday. It turned out that the price was the amount of time the animals could spend in their human form, and it was different for each one, meaning that the price for such an ability could vary depending on the circumstances. Suddenly, the carriage stopped and Ypres announced that they had finally reached their destination, her voice full of relief, as if a long-awaited journey had come to an end. It was an old town, where the houses were boarded up with planks and nails, creating an atmosphere of abandonment and desolation, as if time had stood still here, and everything living and moving had long since left these streets, leaving them alone and in the shadows of past years. There was no one on the streets, not a single living soul, only stone buildings that stood as silent witnesses to bygone days, as if the city had long since become a ghost of its past. Ypres ordered her brother to take good care of the lady during her absence, for she could not afford to relax, knowing that their safety depended on each of them. Kanu swore on his honor that he would watch over the lovely lady with both eyes, not giving her the slightest reason to worry, because he knew that he was obliged to protect her in any circumstances, not allowing anyone to harm her. There, inside the guild, stood a tall guy with one eye. His blonde hair was a little disheveled, and the displeased expression on his face indicated that he was clearly not in the mood for communication, as if something was really irritating him. Opening his mouth, he asked loudly what uninvited guests had come to visit them, his voice full of displeasure, as if he expected their peace to be disturbed today. There was also a grown muscular man standing inside the bar, who greeted the visitors with a smile and suggested what they should have to eat. His good nature seemed sincere, but it was immediately obvious that he was prepared for any turn of events. However, upon seeing the guests, he suddenly stopped. His eyes widened, and sweat of fear and dread ran down his face, as if he realized that these people were not people to be trifled with. In front of him stood a terrifyingly serious Ypres, with her arms folded across her chest, her back straight, her gaze firm, and behind her stood the lady and the knight, ready to support her at any moment. Taking a bold step forward, the maid ordered the man to immediately take her to the man named Jack, the woman's voice confident as if she already knew that this man could reveal important information. Footsteps sounded on the wooden stairs, their echoes echoing dully in the silence, foreshadowing that their meeting with this grown man would not be just another casual conversation. There were many boxes in the room, They were arranged in a haphazard manner, creating a feeling of crampedness and chaos, as if the space was overflowing with different objects and hidden secrets. When the man suggested that the maiden leave the other people at the entrance, Ypres sternly rejected his words, stating that she wanted to go inside only with her servants, without extra people, so as not to violate her personal safety. The subordinate wanted to object, reminding him that there was an order from the chief not to let in strangers, but he was frightened by Ypres's gaze, which was so decisive and cold that it made him shut up. The door opened, and in the darkness that hid behind it, nothing could be seen, only a black abyss, ready to swallow up everything that entered inside. To get to the real owner of the tavern and the entire city, they had to go down narrow and damp stairs, falling into a dungeon where the air was heavy and the silence oppressive, as if they were plunging into a completely different world. Adelia, who was walking behind, quietly whispered to her maid, who was walking in front, that this place looked creepy and scary. Her voice was full of anxiety, as if she felt that something dangerous was hiding here. Kanu had not gone with them in vain, and with each step, his confidence in his role as a protector grew stronger. He understood that the safety of everyone present depended on his actions, and he was ready to give his life to protect them from any threat. Moreover, the noblewoman also wore a magic ring of summoning around her neck, which the aristocrat gave her with special favor and confidence, because the ring not only symbolized her status, but also served as an important tool. The blade's sharp edge gleamed in the dim torchlight, reflecting the light as if reminding everyone nearby of its deadly sharpness and ability to quickly deal with anyone who dared to oppose its owner. Suddenly, the sword was pointed straight towards the beauty, and she froze in amazement, not having time to react to the moment of the attack. Her heart stopped for a moment, and all the horror and shock of what happened was reflected in her eyes. The attacking rogue was stopped by Sir Kanu, who intervened in time, his blades colliding with the enemy's attack with a deafening sound, and the tension hung in the air as if the whole situation depended on the next moment. Ypres, without thinking, rushed to protect her lady, covering her with her body. Her protective instincts were so strong that she was ready to give her life, just to not allow anyone to harm her mistress. The man who led them into this dungeon reminded the guests that entry here was strictly prohibited, and his words sounded like a reminder of how dangerous and hidden this place was. The maid, holding her mistress in her arms, screamed loudly, indignantly, stating that the boy had not warned them that they would be attacked. Her voice was full of fear and discontent, because they were trapped, not expecting such a thing. The closed door led into a dark space where the master of all the city's possessions, Jack, should be. But the feeling of uncertainty and danger emanating from this place made them doubt what awaited them. At this time, the master of the Information Guild could not choose a suitable outfit to greet his guests. His thoughts were scattered, and his attention was distracted by many small details. The nobles froze in surprise, expecting to see a mercenary who would appear before them completely different, cruel and domineering, and not a modest young man like the one they met, and this caused them a feeling of bewilderment and curiosity. Ypres clenched her teeth in anger, calling her lover a pathetic man, her words echoing with a fury that could almost be felt in the air, reflecting all of her hurt and disappointment. The man shuddered and greeted his beloved, with his mouth open in shock, not expecting her to appear and not knowing how to properly react to her unexpected visit. Throwing all the paperwork aside, Jack walked towards the girl, never taking his eyes off her, his gaze full of both determination and anxiety, as if he expected his actions to have consequences. Cold as ice, Ypres stated that they had almost harmed her mistress, her voice emotionless but threatening, as if she had already made a decision on how to proceed. Jack replied that he had questions ever since he received a letter from his beloved after the disappearance of the penguin wizard. His voice was tense, as if this matter had been bothering him for a long time, and now demanded resolution. After reading the letter, the man was outraged by the fact that Ypres had been spending all this time with the orca and the other guy, and not with him, his anger growing with every word, as if he felt betrayed. Clearly jealous, the handsome man began to get indignant, asking what the beautiful maid saw in another man that she didn't see in him, his voice full of pain and discontent, as if he couldn't understand why he couldn't hold her attention. The maid, without hesitation, chose her mistress, choosing to remain faithful to her despite all the difficulties, and tightly embraced the sweet maiden. Her actions were decisive and full of devotion. Jack pressed his hand to his chest and reminded her loudly that Yprus had promised to marry him, his words sounding confident, but also slightly threatening, as if he expected her promise to be kept. The servant threatened her lover to leave if he did not come to his senses and start working, without helping them in their affairs. Her words were clear and decisive, as if she was ready for any consequences. Under the surprised gaze of his subordinate, Jack did not argue for long and immediately promised to tell all the information he knew to his beloved. The words sounded with slight haste, as if he knew that much depended on it. However, guild policy stated that the client had to be spoken to one-on-one. This meant a private conversation where the penguin lady and the crime boss could discuss their business in private without any unnecessary witnesses. Yprus didn't like the idea, and although Adelia promised that everything would be fine, her face expressed doubt because she couldn't be sure that everything would go as planned. Before leaving, the maid promised to punish the boy if he harmed her mistress. Her words sounded like a threat, and there was a strong determination to protect Adelia in them. The door slammed shut, and the room became considerably less crowded, creating an atmosphere of privacy and anticipation as they were left alone. The courtier placed a magic seal on the door so that no one could eavesdrop on their conversation. His actions were quick and confident, for he knew that the safety of the lady depended on these measures. In the end, only Adelia and Jack were left in the room. No one else in the big, empty room. The space seemed even more oppressive in its silence and loneliness. Suddenly, the head of the guild walked quickly towards the lady, addressing her in a completely unfriendly voice. His intonations sounded cold and distant, as if he did not know how to properly start a conversation. However, instead of threats, the man sincerely asked the girl to help him get closer to his ex-lover. His words were full of sincere request, and even a little vulnerability, which of course surprised Adelia. The beauty's face was filled with disgust and misunderstanding of the situation. Her gaze was full of disappointment, because she could not understand why this person, with whom she had her own relationship, suddenly asked for help in such a personal matter. Sitting down on the sofa, she firmly stated that if he wanted to make peace with the maid, then let him do it himself. Her words were decisive, as if she was putting an end to this conversation and was not going to interfere in other people's affairs. According to Yprus, the young couple had previously been serious and were even preparing for the wedding. Their feelings seemed genuine, and their plans were justified, but something prevented them from achieving happiness. However, Jack continued to lie about his biological species, hiding it from the poor girl, which eventually became the cause of discord between them, because secrets destroyed the trust that should have been the basis of their relationship. It turned out that Yprus had the ideal type of lover, one whose paws could withstand any cold, and with an evil look, as if she was looking for not only gentleness in a man, but also strength ready to protect. Placing his hand on his chest, the boy continued to explain that his appearance was ideal for extracting information, but would hardly please the gentle Yprus, because his cruel and alienated appearance was not what could win her heart. Pointing her finger at the guildmaster, Adelia made the assumption that he was actually a rodent, a mouse hiding his true form, her words full of bewilderment and genuine surprise. And as it turned out, the man really did have an animal form in the form of a field mouse, harmless and cute in appearance, which further strengthened her suspicions that he was not what he seemed. Adelia ordered the guy to go immediately and confess everything to his ex-lover, explaining that she loved cute little things that seemed sweet to her despite their strangeness. When he hinted that the penguins were cruel creatures that the maid loved, Leah gritted her teeth in anger, her face turning red with rage, as she could not allow anyone to humiliate her loved ones like that. The truth was that the servants were afraid of harming the little creatures when they saw them, rather than hating them, and were often embarrassed, not knowing how to react to the fact that they were so fragile and vulnerable. After which Adelia gave her approval, assuring that the beauty would like the guildmaster's beast form. The woman's words sounded with slight confidence, as if she was absolutely convinced of it. The guy, however, was not so confident in himself, doubting that this approach would be correct. His inner experiences were obvious because he did not know how exactly his beloved would perceive this. The maiden's response was to find a healer, one who could develop and create a potion against the epidemic. Her gaze was full of determination, as if the fate of the entire city depended on it. The man just had one person in mind who was an experienced alchemist. His name was mentioned more than once in circles where the abilities of rare specialists were discussed, and everyone knew that he was capable of creating powerful potions and unraveling complex alchemical secrets. Hermits like him were known for their exceptional skills, but after one incident, they disappeared, and no one knew where to look for them anymore. As if the man was hiding from the world for his own reasons. With a wave of his hand, Jack added that the alchemists were hiding in the territory of the cetacean family, his words sounding with a slight insistence, as if this place was the key to their search. Most werewolves lived where their habitat was, but despite this, it was necessary for them to travel to the island where their powers could manifest to the fullest extent. The man's hand extended a map towards the lady, on which were marked the places where all the raccoons were subsequently spotted. His gesture was quick but precise, showing her the information she needed. The girl herself gave her approval and decided to give the guild master a reward for his help. Her face was serious, because she knew that this decision was important for their further actions. The door opened, and Yprus and her brother walked in, their appearance adding a certain tension to the atmosphere, as if their presence could change the course of events. Adlia quickly said that she had a request for the maid, regarding the man standing awkwardly behind her. Her voice was firm, as if she was ready to deal with the situation. The servant's face was distorted with disgust and hostility. Her gaze was full of discontent, as if she had already formed an extremely negative opinion of him. The guildmaster decided to show the truth, with a nervous and slightly timid gesture, turning into a field mouse, demonstrating his true form. His act was unexpected and open. Yprus froze, her mouth hanging open in shock, unable to believe what she had just seen. Adelia, noticing her shocked expression, calmly explained that Jack was simply embarrassed to show his true nature, hiding it until the very end. Turning away from the mouse, the maiden decided to give the man a chance and the opportunity to win her favor. Her gaze was softer, as if she realized that even in such strange circumstances, a chance could be given. The animal jumped joyfully into the air, happily, as if it felt that its efforts had not been in vain, and now it had a chance to be understood. Yprus herself could hardly suppress the desire to pick up the mouse in her arms and kiss it. Her inner excitement was so strong that she could hardly restrain herself from this impulsive gesture. A few days passed, and soon the ceremony was to take place at the Eagle family, where the entire mansion was huge and majestic, preparing for an important event that was to leave a mark in history. Leah used her hands to try to untangle the tangled strands while sitting on her bed. Her movements were nervous as her hair always got tangled, but she dealt with it patiently. She had already gotten used to the fact that Cyrodiil often helped her braid her hair into different hairstyles, including pigtails, and it became part of their usual morning or evening rituals. The mansion was engulfed in darkness. The corridors seemed endless, and the chandeliers did not illuminate the rooms as brightly as one would have liked. Expensive furniture stood in the shadows, giving the whole place a certain gloom. During her night walk, Leah suddenly noticed a guy who was wearing purple robes and who also, for some reason, did not sleep at night. His gaze was focused, as if he was on an important path. With a smile, the aristocrat explained that he was heading to the kingdom of wolves, even at such a late hour, and his words sounded with a slight note of confidence, as if it was completely natural for him. However, the maiden was not going to let the orca go so easily, and insistently asked him to take responsibility for their further actions, her voice sounding firm and confident, as if she could not allow herself to leave important issues unattended. The man did not immediately understand what the beauty was talking about, and froze, with a stupid expression on his face, trying to comprehend her words, because what she demanded was completely unexpected for him, and he was not ready for such a turn of events. The noblewoman began to quickly descend the stairs. Her steps were swift and determined, as if she were in a hurry to do an important task, not paying attention to the surrounding details. Her thoughts were concentrated elsewhere. Suddenly, the stairs began to approach quickly, and the lady, losing her balance, began to fall rapidly. Her body did not have time to react to the changes, and she felt how she was losing control of the situation. The aristocrat fell right into the arms of the handsome man, and his strong arms instantly grabbed her. He also did not expect such a fall of his beloved, but instinctively reacted, trying to hold her and avoid the blow. Suerdale asked his companion to be careful, as she could easily get hurt if she fell from such a height. His words were full of care and concern, as he did not want her well-being to be at risk. The penguin rolled over on the floor, rubbing against the carpet, expressing his boredom and discontent. His movements were slow and awkward, as if he was looking for something to amuse himself or attract attention. Embarrassed, pressing her hands on the guy's chest, Leah asked him to finally let her go, adding that if he refused, she would bite him. Her words were full of a playful threat, but there was a slight alarm in her voice. Suredale playfully winked and offered the beauty a bite on his cheek. His smile was wide, and there was a mischievous glint in his eyes, as if he was ready for any action she might take. The girl's hair, black with white streaks, was tangled, its unruly curls getting in her way, creating a feeling of disorder and discomfort. Adelia explained to her interlocutor that she had tried to untangle the tangles before, but it was all useless until he ran his fingers through her strands, and she felt how his touch calmed her down despite her anxiety. The beauty quickly turned her head towards the boy when he spoke of Ypres, offering her as a maid for the young lady, and her gaze became more wary, as if she was beginning to realize that the situation was taking an unexpected turn. The lady clutched her fist tighter to her chest, her fingers clenched with excitement, and a flicker of worry flashed in her eyes that everything they were talking about could be important for her future. Adelia pretended to think about it, and then agreed that this girl was indeed a worthy candidate for a servant, her words full of appreciation, as if she had really thought about her merits. The man's fingers lingered on the loose white lock, his touch soft but sure, as if he was enjoying the process and trying to understand what was hidden behind the mess. A wide grin appeared on the handsome man's face. His gaze was satisfied, and in his eyes one could read the hidden joy from the way he was influencing the situation. The girl blushed, clutching her hair with her fingers, when she heard the compliment that it smelled very good. Her cheeks were covered with a slight blush, and she involuntarily felt awkward from such unexpected attention. The next morning came, the doors opened, and behind them a table with food was visible, and in the other room there was a noise, creating an atmosphere of morning bustle, as if the day was just beginning. Leah froze in surprise, holding the cutlery in her hands, learning that her presence was also required during the ceremony in the House of Eagles. Her face expressed bewilderment and slight concern. Bella waved her hand, wearing a red cape, and smiling, explained that she wanted to formally introduce the new Orca to the other nobles, her words full of confidence and anticipation. Realizing that this was a great opportunity to meet her father, the girl happily agreed to go to the ceremony, clapping her hands, her eyes sparkling with excitement and curiosity. The male killer whales also intervened in the conversation, inviting the young lady to dance with them afterwards. Their voices sounded friendly, but there was something insistent in their intonation, as if they were waiting for her consent. Bella, with a creepy smile, said that she had ordered a new dress for the little girl in advance. Although she did not know whether she would agree to go to the ball with them, her words sounded confident, but there was a slight hint of threat in them. A shudder ran through the beauty's body from the terrible story of the woman opposite. Her words made Adelia feel something obscurantist, and she could not get rid of the feeling that dark intentions were hidden behind that smile. The nobles gathered in the great hall, holding glasses of champagne in their hands. Their outfits were beautiful and elegant, creating an atmosphere of sophistication and celebration when everyone was ready for the solemn event. Footsteps were heard, and fragile female legs in pink shoes walked forward. Their movements were graceful and light, as if the girl was flying across the hall, attracting the attention of everyone present. It was the lovely Adelia in a new dress made of roses. Her look was delightful and delicate, and she walked accompanied by a young man who was dressed in pink and white shades, as if they were one harmonious couple. Shaking her head from side to side, the girl looked for her father, Her gaze was full of excitement and anticipation. She hoped to find him among the guests to feel support. Cyrodiil asked his companion what was bothering her so much and offered his help, but she politely declined, her voice calm and confident despite her inner experiences. The hall was filled with ladies in white dresses who were chatting animatedly with the gentlemen, creating an atmosphere of sophistication and refinement where their every gesture and word attracted attention. Among them, a bright figure in black and red stood out. It was the main character of the novel. His presence immediately attracted attention, as if he was the embodiment of strength and mystery among this whole crowd. Theodore stood in the middle of the hall with an angry expression on his face, his red eyes blazing with rage, as if he was ready to tear apart everything in his path, and his whole figure radiated tension and aggression. Suddenly, the man walked towards the girl and leaned over her, his tall figure seeming threatening and unapproachable, as if he was ready to capture her attention or force her into submission. Leah hurried to hide, leaving her white orca with the black wolf. The guys were two opposites, one angry and aggressive, and the other calm and collected, like two forces opposing each other. The black-gloved hand clenched into a fist, its fingers tensing with emotion, as if it were preparing for action despite the tense atmosphere around it. The only word that came out of the handsome black-haired man's mouth was one of furious displeasure. His face contorted in disgust, as if he couldn't hide his rage at what was happening. Leah froze in disbelief. Her eyes widened and her mouth dropped open in surprise, as if she couldn't believe what was happening, feeling that it was all too absurd to be true. The lady asked the young man standing next to her if it was surprising that the Wolf Lord had completely lost his mind after the hunting competition, her voice sounding with a slight hint of bewilderment, as if she couldn't understand how this could happen to such a respected man. Cyrodiil, on the other hand, was not at all angry, even when another lord insulted him. His face remained calm and unperturbed, and to him Theodore seemed like something insignificant, like an angry ant that could be easily ignored without wasting time and emotions on him. The beauty asked her companion if he had done anything bad to the wolf during their last meetings. She was worried. Her words sounded with slight anxiety, because she could not be sure that nothing had happened between them. Theodore walked quickly out of the room, slamming the door, his teeth clenched in anger, his face full of rage and indignation. His steps were quick and determined, as if he was ready to destroy everything in his path to get rid of this hatred. Last night, when Cyrodiil came to heal the werewolf, he left behind a pleasant, sweet scent that filled the air, creating an atmosphere of comfort and peace. The scent was so soft and warm that it seemed as if it itself was part of the magic. The same scent was present at the ceremony when they met again, and next to them stood a girl in a pink dress. Her image seemed as gentle and refined as this exciting scent, which seemed to emphasize the moment of their meeting. The ring on one of the guy's fingers also attracted attention. Its metallic shine stood out against the background of everything that was happening, like a sign of something important and significant that could change their destinies. Theodore himself could not forget that strange, charming stranger who had saved him. Her image still stood before his eyes, and every memory of her was filled with gratitude and secret excitement. When they came face to face, for the first time, the man realized that the mark left on his body was not like a curse, but rather a blessing, a symbol of something deep and meaningful that connected them. But he did not have time to put a mark on himself or on this beautiful stranger. Their meeting was too short, and neither of them knew what consequences could have come from these unfinished actions. And this meant that they had to maintain physical and eye contact so that next time they could mark their mate. This act was something important and obligatory, like an inevitable step in their destiny. The temporary healing spell helped the boy for only a moment, but soon he became ill again, and he coughed, feeling his strength slipping away despite all his efforts. Gritting his teeth, he realized that until he left a mark on his beloved, his fever would not pass, and he would not be able to get rid of this painful condition that was increasingly binding him. But not wanting to accept his own fate so easily, Theodore burst into the stranger's room and asked his mother to stop looking for his marked and forgotten beloved, his voice full of determination, as if he could not bear this silence any longer. The worried mother raised her hand up, worried for the life of her son, who could die if he did not find his mate. Her anxiety was so strong that she felt her heart squeeze with fear for his future. Breathing heavily, Theodore stubbornly replied that he would find another way out, his voice full of determination, although his body betrayed weakness, and his eyes showed a struggle with his own doubts and pain. The mother firmly understood that it was useless to persuade her son, and therefore decided to take everything into her own hands. Her gaze was full of determination and strength, as if she was ready to do everything to protect him from his own decisions. Meanwhile, Adelia was at the ball, bored and not knowing what to do, her gaze wandering around the room, and she felt how time was dragging on too slowly, as if every moment was devoid of meaning. When suddenly Bella noticed her, dressed in a formal white dress with decorations. Her steps were confident, and in her eyes there was a gleam of anticipation, as if she was ready to offer Adelia something important that could change the course of her evening. The woman was eager to introduce the younger lady to one of her acquaintances, her eyes shining with excitement, as if she considered this acquaintance an important step for her ward. A lady stood nearby, with a fan in her hands, her gold jewelry glittering in the light, and she, noticing the girl, clenched her teeth in recognition, as if she did not want to reveal her feelings, but could not hide her curiosity. The ladies of high society giggled as they began to discuss the young Orca. Their conversation was full of ridicule, and they did not bother to hide their dislike, their eyes sparkling with satisfaction at the fact that they could humiliate someone else's weakness, not noticing how their words hurt. Adelia felt uncomfortable when she heard that she was assigned to a different species than her actual penguin, and this comment about her true nature left her feeling rejected and struggling internally with how others perceived her. Bella sighed and confirmed that her son was special, unlike other werewolves. His nature was different, and it was clearly visible, as if his essence was not like the others, distinguishing him from the crowd as something unique and unrepeatable. The women began to make noise, exchanging glances and whispering awkwardly, implying that it was good that the boy turned out to be a predator and not a herbivore, because this gave him a certain danger and strength. Hiding her face behind a fan, one of the ladies asked whether Bella was planning to cross her son with a young killer whale. Her question sounding with mild interest, but with a hidden undercurrent of curiosity. Bella, putting her arm around the girl's shoulders, said that it would be a stupid union, and also that her son was not interested in marriage. Her words were calm, but there was a firmness hidden in them, as if she had made this decision long ago. The women's eyes lit up with anticipation when they learned that they could get such a good bride, and their imaginations immediately filled with plans for the future, seeing in this a profitable union that would bring not only status, but also strengthen their position in society. Without thinking twice, they began to eagerly offer their sons for marriage to the rich killer whale, each of them hoping that his candidacy would be ideal for such a marriage, ready to seize any opportunity to join the promising union. Bella thanked her friends for their offers, but answered reservedly that it was too early for a lady to talk about finding a partner, since she had only recently become a human being, and there was not enough time for such decisions. These words really stunned the noble ladies, and they fell silent, closing their mouths, realizing that their dreams of advantageous marriages could face insurmountable obstacles. The reason for this reaction was that the life of a werewolf is closely connected with the moment of transition of a person into an animal, and this transition leaves a deep mark on his existence. The werewolf's body after death retained the form in which he died, and if he died in the form of an animal, then it was almost impossible to recognize his true essence, because his human form disappeared forever, leaving only the form in which he found himself at the last moment. This circumstance led to many unfortunate incidents when werewolves were hunted without knowing that a human soul was hidden behind them. Each such event became a tragedy, worsening their already difficult fate. Realizing that there was no catch to be found, the grown ladies left with disappointed sighs, leaving behind only emptiness and regrets about the failed attempt, as if all their efforts were not worth a minute of attention. Adelia was able to breathe a sigh of relief, feeling how the heaviness that had been weighing on her soul gradually receded, and the internal tension that had not left her since the very beginning of the meeting finally dissolved, leaving a feeling of lightness and calm. Bella sat down and, with a smile, asked the little girl to have fun at her first banquet in her life, and not to be upset, because this was her opportunity to enjoy the moment and not waste it on worries. The hall was richly furnished, with golden chandeliers sparkling in the light, creating an atmosphere of luxury and elegance, where every element of the interior, be it majestic columns or expensive fabrics, emphasized the solemnity of the event and added a sense of grandeur. As Adelia headed towards the suites to have a snack, enjoying the moment, a strange gentleman approached her, his eyes sparkling with some inner fire, and his look was full of mystery, as if he knew something important. Unable to resist the charming girl, he asked her to dance, turning up his nose with a slight smirk, as if this dance was his way of demonstrating confidence and interest. Adelia replied rudely that she already had a partner in the form of another killer whale, her words sounding firm and confident, as if she was not going to waste time on empty talk. One after another, the young men approached her, but she refused each one, showing no interest. Her gaze was cold and distant, and her every word sounded like an irrevocable sentence. Just hearing the name of the evil sorcerer, the boys began to tremble with fear, retreating themselves, as if unable to cope with the horror that this name caused, because it was associated with obscurantism and unimaginable power, forcing even the bravest to lose their will. Suradale was so famous for his cruel smile that his gaze was sometimes more terrifying than any weapon, and his reputation made people avoid his presence, fearing even a casual encounter. Intrigued, the girl suddenly wondered where exactly her companion was, and suddenly noticed him in the company of another lady, which immediately attracted her attention and caused alarm. There was a tense atmosphere between the young couple, and the girl stood in front of the guy, confused, not knowing how to react to what was happening before her eyes. For some reason, she was shaking all over with fear, like a victim experiencing an encounter with a predator, feeling her heart beat faster and her mind losing confidence, giving into anxiety. It turned out that the guy simply declined the offer of a dance with a smirk, not paying attention to what was happening. His gaze was detached, as if he did not want to get involved in this empty conversation. The lady turned out to be rude, accusing the Lord of lying and saying that he simply did not like women. Her words were filled with anger, and her look was contemptuous, as if she was sure that her rightness was beyond doubt. The killer whale's voice became cold, hateful, and the dark aura emanating from it made those around it feel fear, as if the very atmosphere around it began to change. Suddenly, Adelia stood up to protect the poor guy, covering him with her figure. Her body became a barrier to attacks, and in her eyes burned the fire of determination, ready to fight for justice, despite the possible consequences. The beauty began to attack the impudent girl, asking why she insisted even after refusing to dance. Her voice sounded firm. Complete displeasure was evident in every word, as if she was not going to tolerate such behavior. The maiden immediately recognized the baby as a new killer whale and said with disdain that she was not worth a penny and only got here thanks to her mistress. Her words were harsh and full of arrogance, as if she did not take her interlocutor seriously. Pointing her finger at the companion next to her, Adelia loudly declared in front of everyone that he was her partner, her words sounding confident, as if she had no intention of hiding her relationship and stood her ground, not allowing anyone to doubt her decisions. The girl extended her palm forward, inviting her boyfriend to leave this place. Her gesture was full of determination, and, not paying attention to those around her, she invited him to leave this place, as if they were both above everything happening around them. The man's hand immediately grabbed the woman's, with force, but at the same time with tenderness, as if it was the only way to support her, not allowing her to feel even the slightest discomfort, and this imperceptible care gave their interaction warmth. Suradale hugged the girl tenderly, his arms confident but soft, ready to twirl her in a dance, as if this moment was special for him, and he was ready to devote himself completely to her, not paying attention to those around him. Left alone, the impudent and rude girl silently watched the sweet scene of the lovers. Her face remained tense, and her gaze was full of envy and discontent, as if she could not understand why attempts to ruin the moment were so ineffective. Her body shook with horror as she, with difficulty comprehending the hidden meaning of his words, realized that he was hinting at the fact that the couple had slept in an embrace at night, and her heart sank with shame that could not be hidden. Unable to bear this disgrace, the lady hastily fled the room, her steps quick and uncertain, her face flushed with embarrassment, as if she were trying to escape from her own thoughts. Suradale smiled and addressed his beloved, confessing that his type had always been cute penguins. His words sounded sincere and a little playful, creating a light atmosphere in the midst of a tense moment. Night had fallen, and the whale estate was dark, as if the very atmosphere reflected the disturbing thoughts that haunted everyone in the place. Raising her arms up and stretching, Adelia was sincerely glad that the ceremony was finally over. Her body relaxed, and her soul was filled with long-awaited peace, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. And now, finally, she could allow herself to breathe freely. Suddenly, she remembered the guy's words that he had prepared 2 gifts for her, and one of them was supposed to be in her room, which made her heart beat faster with curiosity and anticipation, because she did not know what was hidden behind this gift. Intrigued, the lady reached for the door handle, and with each step, her internal tension grew. She wanted to know what exactly was hidden behind this door, and why he did not tell about the contents of the gifts. As soon as she carefully opened the door, it became clear to her that there was someone inside. This person turned out to be her faithful and devoted servant, and her presence could not help but arouse warm feelings in the girl. Smiling, Ypres stood in the room, like a flower blossoming in the rays of the morning sun, gently radiating light, and her gaze was full of care and devotion, like a friend of her mistress, who is always ready to please with support. Adelia literally lit up with happiness, folding her hands in front of her in a gesture of gratitude and joy, her face shining with emotion, and her eyes showing genuine gratitude for the presence of her faithful friend. Without holding back, she rushed to embrace her familiar servant, feeling her heart fill with warmth and gratitude for the support she always gave her, no matter the circumstances. The maid, hearing the lady's question about turning into a beast, thought for a moment, collecting her thoughts, and then began to tell how it happens. Her voice was calm, but with a hint of excitement, as if she were sharing something important and personal. As a comparison, she explained that for werewolves, turning back into a human was as natural as breathing, effortless, as if it was in their blood, and they could not imagine their lives without this abilities. A large bag lay nearby on the floor, attracting attention with its sudden massiveness and strange presence in the expensive room of an aristocrat. Adelia, unable to contain her curiosity, asked what was inside, and the maid hastened to look into the bag to show the contents, her hands impatiently rummaging around in the depths, full of anticipation of what might be inside. A multitude of precious stones poured out of the bag, their bright hues reflecting the light, creating a real rainbow that filled the room with lights, playing on the walls and mirrors like little stars. The lady was delighted with such an expensive gift. Her face lit up with a blush, and her eyes lit up with delight. She could not hide her joy and surprise, feeling how this moment filled her heart with a touching feeling of gratitude and admiration. Covering her face with happiness, the beauty hugged her friend, feeling her heart overflow with warmth and gratitude for this moment of joy and surprise. At that moment, sitting among the sparkling stones, the girl suddenly wanted to become a penguin again, to return to that simplicity and lightness that she felt when her world was full only of her inner peace, without difficult decisions and heavy thoughts. Adelia was determined to learn how to transform into her animal form, feeling how important it could be in her life. She realized that the ability to return to her roots would give her the opportunity to find harmony with herself. However, no matter how hard the lady tried, she could not do it. And, having lost her strength, she fell limply to the floor. Her body seemed to stop obeying, as if all her efforts had disappeared into thin air, leaving only a feeling of emptiness and fatigue. Suddenly, the room began to spin, and everything around went dark, as if the world had turned upside down, swallowing up the light and leaving only an indefinite darkness in which everything became vague and unsteady. And, to his surprise, a penguin appeared in the middle of the room, in the very place where the lady had stood just a moment ago, his little paws moving and his gaze full of mystery, as if it was destined by fate. When he hinted that the penguins were cruel creatures that the maid loved, Leah gritted her teeth in anger, her face turning red with rage, as she could not allow anyone to humiliate her loved ones like that. The truth was that the servants were afraid of harming the little creatures when they saw them, rather than hating them, and were often embarrassed, not knowing how to react to the fact that they were so fragile and vulnerable. After which Adelia gave her approval, assuring that the beauty would like the guildmaster's beast form. The woman's words sounded with slight confidence, as if she was absolutely convinced of it. The guy, however, was not so confident in himself, doubting that this approach would be correct. His inner experiences were obvious, because he did not know how exactly his beloved would perceive this. The maiden's response was to find a healer, one who could develop and create a potion against the epidemic. Her gaze was full of determination, as if the fate of the entire city depended on it. The man just had one person in mind who was an experienced alchemist. His name was mentioned more than once in circles where the abilities of rare specialists were discussed, and everyone knew that he was capable of creating powerful potions and unraveling complex alchemical secrets. Hermits like him were known for their exceptional skills, but after one incident, they disappeared, and no one knew where to look for them anymore, as if the man was hiding from the world for his own reasons. With a wave of his hand, Jack added that the alchemists were hiding in the territory of the cetacean family, his words sounding with a slight insistence, as if this place was the key to their search. Most werewolves lived where their habitat was, but despite this, it was necessary for them to travel to the island where their powers could manifest to the fullest extent. The man's hand extended a map towards the lady, on which were marked the places where all the raccoons were subsequently spotted. His gesture was quick but precise, showing her the information she needed. The girl herself gave her approval and decided to give the guild master a reward for his help. Her face was serious, because she knew that this decision was important for their further actions. The door opened, and Yprus and her brother walked in, their appearance adding a certain tension to the atmosphere, as if their presence could change the course of events. Adelia quickly said that she had a request for the maid, regarding the man standing awkwardly behind her. Her voice was firm, as if she was ready to deal with the situation. The servant's face was distorted with disgust and hostility. Her gaze was full of discontent, as if she had already formed an extremely negative opinion of him. The guildmaster decided to show the truth, with a nervous and slightly timid gesture, turning into a field mouse, demonstrating his true form. His act was unexpected and open. Yprus froze, her mouth hanging open in shock, unable to believe what she had just seen. Adelia, noticing her shocked expression, calmly explained that Jack was simply embarrassed to show his true nature, hiding it until the very end. Turning away from the mouse, the maiden decided to give the man a chance and the opportunity to win her favor. Her gaze was softer, as if she realized that even in such strange circumstances, a chance could be given. The animal jumped joyfully into the air, happily, as if it felt that its efforts had not been in vain, and now it had a chance to be understood. Yprus herself could hardly suppress the desire to pick up the mouse in her arms and kiss it. Her inner excitement was so strong that she could hardly restrain herself from this impulsive gesture. A few days passed, and soon the ceremony was to take place at the Eagle family, where the entire mansion was huge and majestic, preparing for an important event that was to leave a mark in history. Leah used her hands to try to untangle the tangled strands while sitting on her bed. Her movements were nervous as her hair always got tangled, but she dealt with it patiently. She had already gotten used to the fact that Cyrodiil often helped her braid her hair into different hairstyles, including pigtails, and it became part of their usual morning or evening rituals. The mansion was engulfed in darkness. The corridors seemed endless, and the chandeliers did not illuminate the rooms as brightly as one would have liked. Expensive furniture stood in the shadows, giving the whole place a certain gloom. During her night walk, Leah suddenly noticed a guy who was wearing purple robes and who also, for some reason, did not sleep at night. His gaze was focused, as if he was on an important path. With a smile, the aristocrat explained that he was heading to the kingdom of wolves, even at such a late hour, and his words sounded with a slight note of confidence, as if it was completely natural for him. However, the maiden was not going to let the orca go so easily, and insistently asked him to take responsibility for their further actions, her voice sounding firm and confident, as if she could not allow herself to leave important issues unattended. The man did not immediately understand what the beauty was talking about, and froze, with a stupid expression on his face, trying to comprehend her words, because what she demanded was completely unexpected for him, and he was not ready for such a turn of events. The noblewoman began to quickly descend the stairs. Her steps were swift and determined, as if she were in a hurry to do an important task, not paying attention to the surrounding details. Her thoughts were concentrated elsewhere. Suddenly, the stairs began to approach quickly, and the lady, losing her balance, began to fall rapidly. Her body did not have time to react to the changes, and she felt how she was losing control of the situation. The aristocrat fell right into the arms of the handsome man, and his strong arms instantly grabbed her. He also did not expect such a fall of his beloved, but instinctively reacted, trying to hold her and avoid the blow. Suordale asked his companion to be careful, as she could easily get hurt if she fell from such a height. His words were full of care and concern, as he did not want her well-being to be at risk. The penguin rolled over on the floor, rubbing against the carpet, expressing his boredom and discontent. His movements were slow and awkward, as if he was looking for something to amuse himself or attract attention. Embarrassed, pressing her hands on the guy's chest, Leah asked him to finally let her go, adding that if he refused, she would bite him. Her words were full of a playful threat, but there was a slight alarm in her voice. Suordale playfully winked and offered the beauty a bite on his cheek. His smile was wide, and there was a mischievous glint in his eyes, as if he was ready for any action she might take. The girl's hair, black with white streaks, was tangled, its unruly curls getting in her way, creating a feeling of disorder and discomfort. Adelia explained to her interlocutor that she had tried to untangle the tangles before, but it was all useless until he ran his fingers through her strands, and she felt how his touch calmed her down despite her anxiety. The beauty quickly turned her head towards the boy when he spoke of Ypres, offering her as a maid for the young lady, and her gaze became more wary, as if she was beginning to realize that the situation was taking an unexpected turn. The lady clutched her fist tighter to her chest, her fingers clenched with excitement, and a flicker of worry flashed in her eyes that everything they were talking about could be important for her future. Adelia pretended to think about it, and then agreed that this girl was indeed a worthy candidate for a servant, her words full of appreciation, as if she had really thought about her merits. The man's fingers lingered on the loose white lock, his touch soft but sure, as if he was enjoying the process and trying to understand what was hidden behind the mess. A wide grin appeared on the handsome man's face. His gaze was satisfied, and in his eyes one could read the hidden joy from the way he was influencing the situation. The girl blushed, clutching her hair with her fingers, when she heard the compliment that it smelled very good. Her cheeks were covered with a slight blush, and she involuntarily felt awkward from such unexpected attention. The next morning came, the doors opened, and behind them a table with food was visible, and in the other room there was a noise, creating an atmosphere of morning bustle, as if the day was just beginning. Leah froze in surprise, holding the cutlery in her hands, learning that her presence was also required during the ceremony in the House of Eagles. Her face expressed bewilderment and slight concern. Bella waved her hand, wearing a red cape, and smiling, explained that she wanted to formally introduce the new Orca to the other nobles, her words full of confidence and anticipation. Realizing that this was a great opportunity to meet her father, the girl happily agreed to go to the ceremony, clapping her hands, her eyes sparkling with excitement and curiosity. The male killer whales also intervened in the conversation, inviting the young lady to dance with them afterwards. Their voices sounded friendly, but there was something insistent in their intonation, as if they were waiting for her consent. Bella, with a creepy smile, said that she had ordered a new dress for the little girl in advance. Although she did not know whether she would agree to go to the ball with them, her words sounded confident, but there was a slight hint of threat in them. A shudder ran through the beauty's body from the terrible story of the woman opposite. Her words made Adelia feel something obscurantist, and she could not get rid of the feeling that dark intentions were hidden behind that smile. The nobles gathered in the great hall, holding glasses of champagne in their hands. Their outfits were beautiful and elegant, creating an atmosphere of sophistication and celebration when everyone was ready for the solemn event. Footsteps were heard, and fragile female legs in pink shoes walked forward. Their movements were graceful and light, as if the girl was flying across the hall, attracting the attention of everyone present. It was the lovely Adelia in a new dress made of roses. Her look was delightful and delicate, and she walked accompanied by a young man who was dressed in pink and white shades, as if they were one harmonious couple. Shaking her head from side to side, the girl looked for her father. Her gaze was full of excitement and anticipation. She hoped to find him among the guests to feel support. Suradale asked his companion what was bothering her so much and offered his help, but she politely declined, her voice calm and confident despite her inner experiences. The hall was filled with ladies in white dresses who were chatting animatedly with the gentlemen, creating an atmosphere of sophistication and refinement where their every gesture and word attracted attention. Among them, a bright figure in black and red stood out. It was the main character of the novel. His presence immediately attracted attention, as if he was the embodiment of strength and mystery among this whole crowd. Theodore stood in the middle of the hall with an angry expression on his face, his red eyes blazing with rage, as if he was ready to tear apart everything in his path, and his whole figure radiated tension and aggression. Suddenly, the man walked towards the girl and leaned over her, his tall figure seeming threatening and unapproachable, as if he was ready to capture her attention or force her into submission. Leah hurried to hide, leaving her white orca with the black wolf. The guys were two opposites, one angry and aggressive, and the other calm and collected, like two forces opposing each other. The black-gloved hand clenched into a fist, its fingers tensing with emotion, as if it were preparing for action despite the tense atmosphere around it. The only word that came out of the handsome black-haired man's mouth was one of furious displeasure. His face contorted in disgust, as if he couldn't hide his rage at what was happening. Leah froze in disbelief. Her eyes widened, and her mouth dropped open in surprise, as if she couldn't believe what was happening, feeling that it was all too absurd to be true. The lady asked the young man standing next to her if it was surprising that the Wolf Lord had completely lost his mind after the hunting competition, her voice sounding with a slight hint of bewilderment, as if she couldn't understand how this could happen to such a respected man. Suradale, on the other hand, was not at all angry. Even when another lord insulted him, his face remained calm and unperturbed, and to him Theodore seemed like something insignificant, like an angry ant that could be easily ignored without wasting time and emotions on him. The beauty asked her companion if he had done anything bad to the wolf during their last meetings. She was worried. Her words sounded with slight anxiety, because she could not be sure that nothing had happened between them. Theodore walked quickly out of the room, slamming the door, his teeth clenched in anger, his face full of rage and indignation. His steps were quick and determined, as if he was ready to destroy everything in his path to get rid of this hatred. Last night, when Suradale came to heal the werewolf, he left behind a pleasant, sweet scent that filled the air, creating an atmosphere of comfort and peace. The scent was so soft and warm that it seemed as if it itself was part of the magic. The same scent was present at the ceremony when they met again, and next to them stood a girl in a pink dress. Her image seemed as gentle and refined as this exciting scent, which seemed to emphasize the moment of their meeting. The ring on one of the guy's fingers also attracted attention. Its metallic shine stood out against the background of everything that was happening, like a sign of something important and significant that could change their destinies. Theodore himself could not forget that strange, charming stranger who had saved him. Her image still stood before his eyes, and every memory of her was filled with gratitude and secret excitement. When they came face to face, for the first time, the man realized that the mark left on his body was not like a curse, but rather a blessing, a symbol of something deep and meaningful that connected them. But he did not have time to put a mark on himself or on this beautiful stranger. Their meeting was too short, and neither of them knew what consequences could have come from these unfinished actions. And this meant that they had to maintain physical and eye contact so that next time they could mark their mate. This act was something important and obligatory, like an inevitable step in their destiny. The temporary healing spell helped the boy for only a moment, But soon he became ill again, and he coughed, feeling his strength slipping away despite all his efforts. Gritting his teeth, he realized that until he left a mark on his beloved, his fever would not pass, and he would not be able to get rid of this painful condition that was increasingly binding him. But not wanting to accept his own fate so easily, Theodore burst into the stranger's room and asked his mother to stop looking for his marked and forgotten beloved, his voice full of determination, as if he could not bear this silence any longer. The worried mother raised her hand up, worried for the life of her son, who could die if he did not find his mate. Her anxiety was so strong that she felt her heart squeeze with fear for his future. Breathing heavily, Theodore stubbornly replied that he would find another way out, his voice full of determination, although his body betrayed weakness, and his eyes showed a struggle with his own doubts and pain. The mother firmly understood that it was useless to persuade her son, and therefore decided to take everything into her own hands. Her gaze was full of determination and strength, as if she was ready to do everything to protect him from his own decisions. Meanwhile, Adelia was at the ball, bored and not knowing what to do, her gaze wandering around the room, and she felt how time was dragging on too slowly, as if every moment was devoid of meaning. When suddenly Bella noticed her, dressed in a formal white dress with decorations. Her steps were confident, and in her eyes there was a gleam of anticipation, as if she was ready to offer Adelia something important that could change the course of her evening. The woman was eager to introduce the younger lady to one of her acquaintances, her eyes shining with excitement, as if she considered this acquaintance an important step for her ward. A lady stood nearby, with a fan in her hands, her gold jewelry glittering in the light, and she, noticing the girl, clenched her teeth in recognition, as if she did not want to reveal her feelings, but could not hide her curiosity. The ladies of high society giggled as they began to discuss the young Orca. Their conversation was full of ridicule, and they did not bother to hide their dislike, their eyes sparkling with satisfaction at the fact that they could humiliate someone else's weakness, not noticing how their words hurt. Adelia felt uncomfortable when she heard that she was assigned to a different species than her actual penguin, and this comment about her true nature left her feeling rejected and struggling internally with how others perceived her. Bella sighed and confirmed that her son was special, unlike other werewolves. His nature was different, and it was clearly visible, as if his essence was not like the others, distinguishing him from the crowd as something unique and unrepeatable. The women began to make noise, exchanging glances and whispering awkwardly, implying that it was good that the boy turned out to be a predator and not a herbivore, because this gave him a certain danger and strength. Hiding her face behind a fan, one of the ladies asked whether Bella was planning to cross her son with a young killer whale. Her question sounding with mild interest, but with a hidden undercurrent of curiosity. Bella, putting her arm around the girl's shoulders, said that it would be a stupid union, and also that her son was not interested in marriage. Her words were calm, but there was a firmness hidden in them, as if she had made this decision long ago. The women's eyes lit up with anticipation when they learned that they could get such a good bride, and their imaginations immediately filled with plans for the future, seeing in this a profitable union that would bring not only status, but also strengthen their position in society. Without thinking twice, they began to eagerly offer their sons for marriage to the rich killer whale, each of them hoping that his candidacy would be ideal for such a marriage, ready to seize any opportunity to join the promising union. Bella thanked her friends for their offers, but answered reservedly that it was too early for a lady to talk about finding a partner, since she had only recently become a human being, and there was not enough time for such decisions. These words really stunned the noble ladies, and they fell silent, closing their mouths, realizing that their dreams of advantageous marriages could face insurmountable obstacles. The reason for this reaction was that the life of a werewolf is closely connected with the moment of transition of a person into an animal, and this transition leaves a deep mark on his existence. The werewolf's body after death retained the form in which he died, and if he died in the form of an animal, then it was almost impossible to recognize his true essence, because his human form disappeared forever, leaving only the form in which he found himself at the last moment. This circumstance led to many unfortunate incidents when werewolves were hunted without knowing that a human soul was hidden behind them. Each such event became a tragedy, worsening their already difficult fate. Realizing that there was no catch to be found, the grown ladies left with disappointed sighs, leaving behind only emptiness and regrets about the failed attempt, as if all their efforts were not worth a minute of attention. Adelia was able to breathe a sigh of relief, feeling how the heaviness that had been weighing on her soul gradually receded, and the internal tension that had not left her since the very beginning of the meeting finally dissolved, leaving a feeling of lightness and calm. Bella sat down and, with a smile, asked the little girl to have fun at her first banquet in her life, and not to be upset, because this was her opportunity to enjoy the moment and not waste it on worries. The hall was richly furnished, with golden chandeliers sparkling in the light, creating an atmosphere of luxury and elegance, where every element of the interior, be it majestic columns or expensive fabrics, emphasized the solemnity of the event and added a sense of grandeur. As Adelia headed towards the suites to have a snack, enjoying the moment, a strange gentleman approached her, his eyes sparkling with some inner fire, and his look was full of mystery, as if he knew something important. Unable to resist the charming girl, he asked her to dance, turning up his nose with a slight smirk, as if this dance was his way of demonstrating confidence and interest. Adelia replied rudely that she already had a partner in the form of another killer whale, her words sounding firm and confident, as if she was not going to waste time on empty talk. One after another, the young men approached her, but she refused each one, showing no interest. Her gaze was cold and distant, and her every word sounded like an irrevocable sentence. Just hearing the name of the evil sorcerer, the boys began to tremble with fear, retreating themselves, as if unable to cope with the horror that this name caused, because it was associated with obscurantism and unimaginable power, forcing even the bravest to lose their will. Cyrodiil was so famous for his cruel smile that his gaze was sometimes more terrifying than any weapon, and his reputation made people avoid his presence, fearing even a casual encounter. Intrigued, the girl suddenly wondered where exactly her companion was, and suddenly noticed him in the company of another lady, which immediately attracted her attention and caused alarm. There was a tense atmosphere between the young couple, and the girl stood in front of the guy, confused, not knowing how to react to what was happening before her eyes. For some reason, she was shaking all over with fear, like a victim experiencing an encounter with a predator, feeling her heart beat faster and her mind losing confidence, giving into anxiety. It turned out that the guy simply declined the offer of a dance with a smirk, not paying attention to what was happening. His gaze was detached, as if he did not want to get involved in this empty conversation. The lady turned out to be rude, accusing the Lord of lying and saying that he simply did not like women. Her words were filled with anger, and her look was contemptuous, as if she was sure that her rightness was beyond doubt. The killer whale's voice became cold, hateful, and the dark aura emanating from it made those around it feel fear, as if the very atmosphere around it began to change. Suddenly, Adelia stood up to protect the poor guy, covering him with her figure. Her body became a barrier to attacks, and in her eyes burned the fire of determination, ready to fight for justice, despite the possible consequences. The beauty began to attack the impudent girl, asking why she insisted even after refusing to dance. Her voice sounded firm, complete displeasure was evident in every word, as if she was not going to tolerate such behavior. The maiden immediately recognized the baby as a new killer whale and said with disdain that she was not worth a penny and only got here thanks to her mistress. Her words were harsh and full of arrogance, as if she did not take her interlocutor seriously. Pointing her finger at the companion next to her, Adelia loudly declared in front of everyone that he was her partner, her words sounding confident, as if she had no intention of hiding her relationship and stood her ground, not allowing anyone to doubt her decisions. The girl extended her palm forward, inviting her boyfriend to leave this place. Her gesture was full of determination, and, not paying attention to those around her, she invited him to leave this place, as if they were both above everything happening around them. The man's hand immediately grabbed the woman's, with force, but at the same time with tenderness, as if it was the only way to support her, not allowing her to feel even the slightest discomfort, and this imperceptible care gave their interaction warmth. Suradale hugged the girl tenderly, his arms confident but soft, ready to twirl her in a dance, as if this moment was special for him, and he was ready to devote himself completely to her, not paying attention to those around him. Left alone, the impudent and rude girl silently watched the sweet scene of the lovers. Her face remained tense, and her gaze was full of envy and discontent, as if she could not understand why attempts to ruin the moment were so ineffective. Her body shook with horror as she, with difficulty comprehending the hidden meaning of his words, realized that he was hinting at the fact that the couple had slept in an embrace at night, and her heart sank with shame that could not be hidden. Unable to bear this disgrace, the lady hastily fled the room, her steps quick and uncertain, her face flushed with embarrassment, as if she were trying to escape from her own thoughts. Suradale smiled and addressed his beloved, confessing that his type had always been cute penguins. His words sounded sincere and a little playful, creating a light atmosphere in the midst of a tense moment. Night had fallen, and the whale estate was dark, as if the very atmosphere reflected the disturbing thoughts that haunted everyone in the place. Raising her arms up and stretching, Adelia was sincerely glad that the ceremony was finally over. Her body relaxed, and her soul was filled with long-awaited peace, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. And now, finally, she could allow herself to breathe freely. Suddenly, she remembered the guy's words that he had prepared 2 gifts for her, and one of them was supposed to be in her room, which made her heart beat faster with curiosity and anticipation, because she did not know what was hidden behind this gift. Intrigued, the lady reached for the door handle, and with each step, her internal tension grew. She wanted to know what exactly was hidden behind this door, and why he did not tell about the contents of the gifts. As soon as she carefully opened the door, it became clear to her that there was someone inside. This person turned out to be her faithful and devoted servant, and her presence could not help but arouse warm feelings in the girl. Smiling, Ypres stood in the room, like a flower blossoming in the rays of the morning sun, gently radiating light, and her gaze was full of care and devotion, like a friend of her mistress, who is always ready to please with support. Adelia literally lit up with happiness, folding her hands in front of her in a gesture of gratitude and joy, her face shining with emotion, and her eyes showing genuine gratitude for the presence of her faithful friend. Without holding back, she rushed to embrace her familiar servant, feeling her heart fill with warmth and gratitude for the support she always gave her, no matter the circumstances. The maid, hearing the lady's question about turning into a beast, thought for a moment, collecting her thoughts, and then began to tell how it happens. Her voice was calm, but with a hint of excitement, as if she were sharing something important and personal. As a comparison, she explained that, for werewolves, turning back into a human was as natural as breathing, effortless, as if it was in their blood, and they could not imagine their lives without this abilities. A large bag lay nearby on the floor, attracting attention with its sudden massiveness and strange presence in the expensive room of an aristocrat. Adelia, unable to contain her curiosity, asked what was inside, and the maid hastened to look into the bag to show the contents, her hands impatiently rummaging around in the depths, full of anticipation of what might be inside. A multitude of precious stones poured out of the bag, their bright hues reflecting the light, creating a real rainbow that filled the room with lights, playing on the walls and mirrors like little stars. The lady was delighted with such an expensive gift. Her face lit up with a blush, and her eyes lit up with delight. She could not hide her joy and surprise, feeling how this moment filled her heart with a touching feeling of gratitude and admiration. Covering her face with happiness, the beauty hugged her friend, feeling her heart overflow with warmth and gratitude for this moment of joy and surprise. At that moment, sitting among the sparkling stones, the girl suddenly wanted to become a penguin again, to return to that simplicity and lightness that she felt when her world was full only of her inner peace, without difficult decisions and heavy thoughts. Adelia was determined to learn how to transform into her animal form, feeling how important it could be in her life. She realized that the ability to return to her roots would give her the opportunity to find harmony with herself. However, no matter how hard the lady tried, she could not do it. And, Having lost her strength, she fell limply to the floor. Her body seemed to stop obeying, as if all her efforts had disappeared into thin air, leaving only a feeling of emptiness and fatigue. Suddenly, the room began to spin, and everything around went dark, as if the world had turned upside down, swallowing up the light and leaving only an indefinite darkness in which everything became vague and unsteady. And to his surprise, a penguin appeared in the middle of the room, in the very place where the lady had stood just a moment ago, his little paws moving and his gaze full of mystery, as if it was destined by fate.